At a Plan Applications Committee, 22nd of November 2014. And could just to remind everyone to make sure their phones are switched off. And got to note that this meeting may be recorded and subsequently made available to the public for listening purposes. Could I ask the clerk to confirm the Sederunt and Apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have 16 members present today, so we are quorate. We have apologies from Councillor Dick, Councillor McCutcheon and Councillor Ogilvie. Thank you.
Have we got any declarations of interest? Andy?
Thanks, Chair. Items 4, 5 and 6 are carried over, and I wasn't a member of the committee at the time, so it wouldn't be. I'll have to vacate the seat for that. Also, item 13, to declare an interest that I was actually the chair of the original steering group of the whole project. So, I'll leave the room for that.
Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. I have to declare interest in item 8 due to a business relationship with one of the representatives. So I'll remove myself from the meeting at that time.
Jack?
Item 11, my wife works in those premises.
Patsy?
Item 15, I'm a partner in the business.
Mal? Sorry, confirm the minutes of the previous meeting and agree any amendments. Could I ask the clerk to outline the procedures to be followed?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and then applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allotted to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Some procedural matters.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to notify the Planning Applications Committee and members of the public that item 7 on today's agenda has been withdrawn. The written confirmation of this was made by PNE Wind UK on the 24th November 2014 to the Planning Department. Therefore, this item will not be heard today. And also in relation to items 4, 5 and 6, Only members who heard the original representation for each item 4, 5 and 6 will be allowed to determine the application. Members who heard the original representation but did not attend the site visit will also be allowed to determine the application for items 4, 5 and 6 today. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going into application, number 4, application Fairway Drive, Minnigaff, Newton Stewart, application for planning permission in principle for erection of dwelling house 14-P/1 0258. 0258, as I say, this was deferred from the from a previous meeting. Members are now in session. Sorry, Billy, you want to go through the slides again?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for planning and permission in principle for a single house. The determining issue is the road access, the private road access. I'll just run you quickly through the slides again to give a picture of what the characteristics of the road, that's the application site. This is the application site itself from the southeast. It's the bottom corner of that larger paddock. So it's the grassed area in the immediate foreground in that view. That's again a closer view of the application site itself. And this is the application site from the other side, taken from the northwest. The following slides take you up the private access road from the public road to the site and then return. So this is the private access where it joins the public road, the B7079. This is a closer view of the access there. This is going up the first part, up the hill, tight bend, constrained on either side by trees, as is mentioned in the report. A view round the bend, looking further up the hill. Emerging from the trees at the top of the hill, the parking space in relation to Minnigaff playing field on the right. Again, this is mentioned in the report. This is on the top of the hill, approaching the site. This is the narrow section that I think I mentioned, I refer to in the report as a pinch point. Boundary treatments there right on the edge of the private access. This is the other end of that narrow section. You can see the site. This is the road going beyond the site. Site's on your right in this view. This is actually further up beyond the site towards the end of the private access road, sorry, I'll just go back to that one. The private access itself terminates in the distance there, just where you see the lighting pole in the centre. The road splits there to 2 individual dwellings, so it's no longer shared access from that point on. This is from approximately the point I've just referred to, looking back down the private access, so the site's on your left in this view. This is the narrow section, the pinch point from the other direction. This is back down, playing field on the left. You see the timber post right on the edge of the carriageway there. That section is slightly wider. This is the top of the hill, parking area for the playing field on the left. Although again, as referred to in the report, the main entrance and parking area for the playing field is from Carrochtery Avenue, not from this shared private lane. This is going down the hill and between the trees, approaching the tight bend itself, coming out at the termination of the private access onto the public road. This is visibility to the right where you're joining the public road, and visibility to the left where you're joining the public road. Reference is made in the report and representations to the fact that you see gates on the left there. That's pedestrian and cycle route to the houses and Minnigaff Primary School up in that direction. So there's potential vehicle pedestrian conflict with traffic leaving or entering the private access and crossing that part onto the public road. So the recommendation is to refuse for the reasons stated.
Billy, any questions? We've got the roads officer. You want to come through? You want to make any remarks on this? Could you, sorry, could you step forward to the table and put the mic, use the mic? That one.
Thank you. The concerns with regard to the private access are mainly limited to the 60 metres that run between the first turning head and the public road. It's already considered to be substandard. There's very little that can be done within the existing boundaries as land appears to be in third-party control. And it's for that reason that we're maintaining an objection. The objection was first raised in respect of 3 dwellings last year. The circumstances haven't changed.
Any member? Ian?
Thanks very much, Chairman. It's in regards to the roads where I have a particular question. If you go back historically along this, the plan history on the site, you could say, and holistically look at the whole site. I think you go back way back to when it first started to be developed. When I look at it, it certainly looks as if it never ever really did comply with the road standards, even back then. But fundamentally, in 2010, Design and Streets came in. So I just wonder, how does it comply with that? Because we're talking about a book that belongs to the council on road design standards for residential development, or is that is that something that's been in front of the council and been agreed, or is that something that's a national government policy? So just to put that into context, please. Again, previously, I think if you look at this, it looks as if it's never really complied if you go back to the road standards. So we're stuck here now. It doesn't comply. Maybe this is the straw that's broke the camel's back. But 2010, there was a fundamental change where you could see a relaxation on the residential development. So could you just get the view of the officer on that, please, Chairman?
Can I just say, we've had a visit, and this is just for clarification on any points in the visit, because we are in session.
Does that mean we can't ask questions, Chairman?
No, you can ask clarification, any points of clarification on the roads. Questions should have been asked the last time before we went into session. So, as I say, we've had the site visit. When we're in session, so as I say, if there are any points that need to be clarified, the roads officer is here to try and get the clarification.
Okay, Chairman. In regards to, because of what I picked up through the site visit, I'd stick to the same question. What's the difference between the way back then and now in regards to the road's position, how it took its position then in regard? I don't think it complied then, but clearly there's been 2010 Design and Streets came in as a matter of policy, and what's the change in difference between what's the main difference between 2010 now? I mean, I can see that it actually looks as if it complies actually a wee bit more compared to what it did back then. That's what it looks in my eyes, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's the same question, Chairman. What's the difference between when it first started getting agreed? I don't think it complied then, but it looks it, but it certainly it doesn't look that much different now.
You'd like to answer that, Ken?
Designing Street came in 2010 certainly provides more flexibility in terms of the fact that it's not a standard-based approach. The fundamental issues with the road, however, remain insofar as my concerns and the concerns of the officer when we carried out the survey on the site originally was that it didn't meet basic safety standards. As a private road, we offer advice to the planners regarding safety, and clearly between the turning head and the public road, there is very poor forward visibility, there's very poor junction visibility, there's no passing places, there's very poor street lighting provision, there's there's no provision for pedestrians to gain refuge or safety. And as such, even with the flexibility that Designing Streets gives us, we would still expect basic safety standards to be met. Now, that does mean that things have changed in the last few years, but the fundamentals of this site haven't changed. And if it wasn't for the restricted nature of that bottom section, we wouldn't be raising any objection to this application. the fact is that it still fails to meet what we would consider to be basic standards.
Ian. Alistair.
Thanks very much indeed, Chairman. Can we go back, please, to the slides with your leave, sir? And, the slide in relation to looking back down the site from the consent which was granted in 2003. I think that'd be helpful, Chair, with your leave. Yeah, yeah, that's the one I'm alluding to, sir. Can I put the question, Chair, to the roads officer that he will accept that, when that application came before the Working Area Regulatory Committee in 2003, the recommendation was to grant, and it was based quite clearly on then local service manager's recommendation. Will you accept that, sir?
Yes.
And would he also accept that in the relevant report, which went to the committee at that time, Chair, with your leave, I'll read you 2 extracts from it, and let me say for the record that Mr. Murray, then as now, was the relevant case officer. That's a matter of fact. It's meant nothing more than that. One of the paragraphs, sir, talks about the proposal will not result in a significant increase in traffic movements onto the B7079 public road. Would the gentleman accept that that's in the report at that time, sir?
Bill. Accept that.
Okay, and the previous committee report as well, sir, reference is made to the fact, again, summing it up, that confirms that in relation to the status quo, additional traffic generated by one additional dwelling house will be minimal. Presumably, Chair, that principle will still apply today, that if this application were to be granted, the additional traffic generated by one additional dwelling house would be minimal. Can we have confirmation of that, sir?
Is that an opinion or?
Yes, clearly the level of traffic generated by a single house is likely to be more or less the same whenever that takes place. I think the thrust of the report and the view taken in this case, where it differs from 2003, is that first of all, the roads officer did not object in 2003. In 2014, the roads officer has objected. And secondly, as I say, the thrust of this report is that this house just takes it too far. It's the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think I would have to say at this point that the whole situation with the access up here and the existing 10 houses, in my view, is a prime example of what can happen where there is unplanned incremental development over time and standards that may have been in place at some point during that development. Whether there were any such standards in place back in the 1950s and indeed 1960s when some of these houses were built, I don't know, although I doubt it. But as I say, I think it's a prime example of what happens when you have unplanned incremental development, and in each case you say, well, it's only one more house, it's not going to be significant, so it'll be okay. You end up with a situation as you have here, which frankly is a chaotic situation in terms of shared accesses, problems for existing residents, as witnessed by the level of representations. And this is why, in my view, this kind of situation emphasises the need to apply clear standards. If those clear standards are applied, everyone knows where they stand, and you don't end up with chaotic situations such as we have here.
Alistair.
Would it be fair, sir, to say that the original proposals mooted 3 houses in this particular location, and after pre-application negotiations, in fact, it was made clear that that could not be supported? And let me say, for the record in passing, that I would happen to agree with that, but the applicant thereupon went ahead and made application for one particular house, this which is before us today. That's factually correct as well, I take it.
The situation at the time of the previous application was for three houses was we got an objection from our colleagues in roads. Their advice was to reject the proposal. I indicated to the applicant's agent that the application was likely to be recommended for refusal. They withdrew the application. There was no further discussion or indication of whether or not a single house application would or would not be successful.
Okay, sir. So again, Chair, with your leave, at the end of the day then, it's essentially Mr Murray saying that this is the tipping point which has been reached today. This, to use his exact terminology, it's the straw that broke the camel's back. Where's the evidence to support that, sir?
Listen, Billy.
I don't think it needs to be evidence. It's guidance and advice from our colleagues in Roads Authority who provide us with their expertise. And as Ken Druitt rightly said, that is advice. On this occasion, having taken that advice, our view, not my personal view, our view, having discussed it with senior officers, was that the recommendation should be to refuse. I would perhaps at this stage draw members' attention to the final couple of sentences in paragraph 410, where we do try to give some kind of steer to the applicant. You know, there may be options, there may be some ways of managing to obtain access to some land to carry out some improvements which would improve the situation. We do not know at this stage whether or not any effort has been made to do that. So, you know, I did try to give some kind of steer at the end of that paragraph that there may be a way forward for a single house.
It would also be correct to say, Chair, that the word on balance is used in relation, I think, to the recommendation. That would be correct in making that point as well.
I think so, yeah.
As we've discussed many times at area and other committees, every recommendation is on balance to some extent because a balance has to be struck between competing imperatives. So yes, I think it's a close decision in this case on what the recommendation was going to be.
Jane?
Thank you, Chairman. I actually welcome the frank and open debate we've had on this, because it's always difficult when you have something that is clearly unbalanced and clearly difficult to decide given previous agreements that have been made through committee. It's not easy, but there's been a site visit, Chairman, and we've heard quite clearly from officers, and I would suggest to you that we would agree the recommendation. So I propose that.
Ivor?
Chair, I was at the site visit, and if you actually look at the impact, one extra house compared to the last one will be less of an impact in percentage terms because there's more houses, and you can keep going on. Another one would be less impact because of the percentage terms. I think there has come a point where you have to draw a line under this, and I would second Councillor Maitland.
Councillor McCarthy?
Yeah, I'd have to support that. I mean, I see where Alistair's coming from, but you get to a stage with these sporadic developments that, well, one more will not do any harm. Then the next one comes along a year later, could be a different planning committee who haven't heard all this. And it goes on and on and on. And then it gets to the point where they start approaching the council saying, why won't you adopt our road, give us streetlights, play areas for the kids, etc., etc., etc. And I think you've got to stop somewhere, so I would agree that this should be refused.
Stephen?
Yeah, just on the actual recommendation, we're talking a lot about pinch points and straws that broke camels' backs, etc. But it's almost leaving it open in terms of a steer for if there were able to be land, road improvements. But I think that's maybe actually a wee bit weak in the sense that if that's leaving it open, does that mean we're talking about the access from the public road or along the actual private road? Or it seems to sort of suggest that, well, there is a way you could do it, but it doesn't actually, we should either say, no, that's it, or here's how you could do it. So it would be helpful to get a wee bit of guidance on that. Thanks.
David?
Yeah, I mean, as Billy correctly said, that there is that steer in paragraph 410. Just to be clear, what we're talking about here is if everybody who had the relevant ownership were to club together and make the road up to adoptable standards, that is something which I understand roads would look at. But that involves a whole lot of private ownership. So as it stands at the moment, the applicant here does not have the control of the land, we understand, to do all that. But should they come to some agreement to be able to put that in place, then that would free up the potential for this one and indeed the rest of that paddock area to be developed. But as it stands at the moment, what we're saying is that the infrastructure is not such that it can accommodate any further housing and safety.
Stephen?
Yeah, I appreciate that, and thank you for that explanation, but I think it's the actual point at which it meets the local authorities part of the road, if you like, which would not necessarily form part of that private agreement between private landowners. We're talking about the light and the access to the B road. Where does that fit in? Because you could effectively develop the private road or agree to do that and still meet a pinch point when you actually come to the point of joining the public road.
I mean, again, we can only determine what's before us. If an application were to come in for that entire road, then that would obviously be looked at. But as it stands at the moment, that isn't part of this proposal. It's just for a house using the existing situation.
Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Well, it'll probably come as no surprise to you, sir, that I am not in accord with Councillor Maitland's motion and seconded by Councillor Hislop, albeit I respect entirely the right to make the motion that they have. It would seem to me, sir, that what we're witnessing here today in relation with it to the technical advice that's before us, and I'm particularly looking at it from a roads perspective, is it's a bigger road to Damascus than St Paul ever experienced. Let me put it that way. But at the end of the day, we are where we are. My view is, in fact, I have not had demonstrated to me that this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, that this is the tipping point. And on that basis, sir, my view is that, as was the decision was in 2003, I think that we could legitimately, this committee could legitimately justify, in fact, the granting of this particular permission, which we are obliged, as Mr. Sutty says, to determine before us today. And I would move as an amendment.
Jim?
Thank you, Chair. We have seen a number of slides here depicting the road. The officer has clearly indicated the road is nowhere near tolerable standard. I fully accept that. This is a very, very difficult one where you've got a situation of incremental development. Do you allow one further property which may not make a huge increase on the level of road usage, or do you draw the line at this stage? Now, on the slide shown, I see no evidence of vehicles actually on the road. What is the evidence that this road has reached saturation level? What is the evidence of road traffic collisions or incidents with pedestrians and vehicles? I think that evidence would have been very, very instructive in this case.
Drew, anything to say on that?
Thank you, Chair. In respect to saturation, it's not saturation that's the issue. It's the fact that it's falling below the basic standards of visibility, footway provision or refuge, passing places, street lighting, and it's not saturation. I dare say that if we actually did run comparative tests on the road, the number of vehicles would be relatively low. But the fact remains that the footway or the actual road from the play facilities down to the public road is used by toddlers and people attending the play park as well as the users of the road. So it's taken into account all of those factors and the fact that it's actually not achieving the basic standards that we would expect. In respect of accident information, I don't have any information at my disposal in regard to accidents that may or may not have occurred on that road. All I could see from looking at pictures of the site is that there's trees which have got damaged, so clearly there are issues with larger vehicles, and the fact that the trees are very, very close to the road edge. To the extent of actual vehicle conflicts and RCCs, I've got no figures for that.
Archie?
If I may, I think at this stage you also, in this context, in terms of evidence, you do have to give some credence to representations from existing residents. You have to give some credence to their experience of using the road, albeit that you've got to factor in that there may be resistance to the house per se, but I think you have to give it some weight.
Just say, can you make sure everything comes through the chair, then you just go in and speak. Archie?
Thanks, Chair. I do have a lot of sympathy with what Alistair's actually saying, so much so that I'm actually going to second his motion. I think it seems a little bit unfair of the planning authority to grant something in 2003 that would have that little bit impact that we couldn't do something in 2014. Now, unfortunately, this is a private road. It's in the ownership of a third person. So I'm quite happy to second Alistair's motion about actually overturning the recommendation and taking this forward.
I think we're just going around in circles here, so. As I say, we've got a motion and an amendment. Quick one.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back, it's a follow-on in a way to what Councillor McCormick said. If you look, sir, at the grounds for refusal, it says the proposal would represent an unacceptable threat to road safety on the basis that increased traffic would result in vehicular and pedestrian conflict. Chair, if you accept the rationale and the argument that the increase in traffic will be minimal, you're scarcely adding, it could be argued, to what has existed there since Adam was a boy, just about. Now, the blunt fact of the matter is that in the good old days, when there was a Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, they presumably would have been consulted on a road safety issue, since it's the Chief Constable, no any council engineer, that's responsible for road safety. Now we've got Police Scotland, some of us would say, alas, but that's the blunt fact of the matter is that the Chief Constable of Police Scotland is still responsible for road safety. Was she ever consulted in relation to these proposals?
Ian?
Just mean, I was going to come in and support Alistair as well, and I'll lay out why I was going to support him, Chairman, in regards to, I asked the question earlier, the difference really between 2003 when that application was granted and now in road designs that came back, 2010, design the streets came into place. That's a relaxation or a policy more that showed flexibility in regards to this type of design. Therefore, it was supported as 2003, the application was granted. So therefore, you'd have to assume that it complied at the time. So if it complied and the policy has come in since in 2010, that shows more flexibility in this. I find it really difficult with the information that's in front of us why this is up for refusal. So certainly I'm going to support the recommendation for approval from the amendment. But in regards to, I mean, I would like to have seen a betterment in regards to it's in principle only. So if for some reason it is approved, I'd like to see a betterment in regards to passing places. Maybe that's something we can look at as time goes on.
Clark?
Thank you. We have, just for clarification, the amendment that's proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, is that approved subject to conditions in place to be prepared by the Planning Authority?
Alistair?
I'm grateful to the clerk for raising it, sir. It most certainly is. And bearing in mind, as Councillor Crothers has just said, this is merely today an application, as it were, in principle. And I accept that, the road is by no means ideal. Only a fool would try to deny that. But at the end of the day, it's all the more reason, as it were, for couching. If it were granted an outline and a detailed application were to come forward, it would require, the couching of appropriate conditions. So I have no problems whatsoever with that. And I'm grateful to Ms McNaught for bringing it to my attention, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Geddes. So we have a motion that has been proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Hislop, to agree the recommendation for refusal as detailed in the report. And we have an amendment proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to approve the application subject to appropriate conditions being put in place by the planning authority.
Councillor.
What appropriate conditions? The appropriate conditions for me would be to put in the passing places, but therefore he doesn't have control of land, therefore it's not reasonable to put on that condition.
Agree with that. Sorry, David.
Chair, yes, I mean, it would, the technical term would be ultra various to actually attach conditions which the applicant couldn't implement, so it would be tantamount to a refusal by requiring them to actually put in parsing places which there was no potential of getting control over. What I think you would normally have, and I can check with Councillor Geddes on this, but the normal conditions that would be attached, because there's a planning permission in principle, would just be the standard conditions which are attached to those type of applications requiring the submission of further details about site and design. Really, probably the only thing I could think about in that context that you might wish to consider is, would you want to have a condition saying it shall be a single-storey property only, for example? Otherwise, the only road sort of condition, because remembering it is a private road it would be coming off, would be just requiring its own parking and turning space within site. Those would be the standard conditions we would apply in a case like this.
Alistair.
That's precisely, sir, what I thought I was alluding to. If I've created any misconceptions, I would ask you, you to accept my apologies as chair, sir.
Can we go to the vote? Make it quick, Ian.
It's very quick. The point I was talking to was actually the frontage of the site itself as being a road widening. That's the point I was talking about. So it is within the ownership of the applicant.
Councillor Dempster.
Have we gone to the vote?
Yes, I apologise. We have gone to the we are going into the vote. I'll repeat just for clarification. The motion was proposed by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Hislop, to agree the recommendation for refusal as detailed in the report. The amendment was proposed by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to approve the application with standard conditions attached.
And the reason I asked you, Elaine, it's normally chair votes first, then vice chair, and then alphabetically after that.
I apologise. Councillor Martin.
Motion.
Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy.
Motion.
Councillor Groom.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor McCottrey.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witt. With a vote of 8 to the motion and 7 to the amendment, the motion will take place. That will be to refuse the application as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Item 5, 1 Robb Place, Castle Douglas, plan application for alterations, extensions to dwelling house 14/B/2/0194. We'll give the slides and then members on it session. Beth, you want to run through the slides?
Thank you, Chair. This proposal is for alterations and extensions to dwelling house at 1 Robb Place, Castle Douglas. A full assessment of the proposals is set out in the report. Take you to the application site. This is the existing floor plan. Proposed ground and first floor plan. The proposed, and this is the block plan. So going through the photograph, this is looking towards the southwest elevation. The hedge, you can see, obscures the view of existing. This is looking towards the northeast elevation, where it shows the flat roof. Just again, but just showing a little bit more street scene. This is looking towards the area of the proposed sunroom extension. Again, just a closer view of Robb. This was me standing in the rear garden, looking towards the southwest, showing boundary treatment. And again, standing in the rear garden, but looking towards the northeast. And you can see the roof of 1 Hillerton Drive background. This was when I was standing in the garden of 3 Robb Place, and again looking north, again see number 1 Hillerton Drive back. And again standing in 3 Robb Place, looking east towards the actual application site. Another view again of the application site again. I'm just angling round when I was standing in the recess of number 3, the boundary. 2. And then this is just a long view, it was actually standing in health ground.
Has members got any points of clarification only after the site visit? Points of clarification only.
Yeah, I received an email which is forwarded to Mr. Sutty with regard to previous planning applications on there. I don't know if it's admissible or not, to ask Mr. Sutty to give his reply, which indicated that there were no planning applications ever refused on that site, or as far as he could find, no pre-planning application talks, discussions about
I think
that
that'll
site.
come out in well, more or less in session, but as I say, just points of clarification for after the site visit. Members, we're in session now. Ivor.
Just with regard to the email I received, Mr. Sutty advised the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that. We've looked through our records and can find no record of any planning application which was refused for this property before, nor could I actually find any in the immediate locality which were sought and refused for any garages.
Yeah, remember. Archie.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, members will remember that we were on the planning visit one nice sunny day that actually was when we went to see the application site, and I do have some concerns about the shadow, but I think what was seen there was well within the requirements of any planning application. I actually saw. It was good to visit the site because you actually see where the extension of the sunroom is actually going to be compared to the window on the side of 3 Robb. It didn't give me any concern to go with the recommendation with the report though. And that being the case, I would suggest that we go with the recommendations.
Members? Seems to be agreed then.
Thank you. Just to confirm, item 5 has been approved unconditionally as recommended in the report. Thank you.
Six on the agenda, 2 Kilfillan, Glenluce, plan application for the erection of a general purpose agricultural building, 13-B/1/0274. David, you explaining this? Take us through the slides and then.
Thank you, Chair. This is the third of the visits that were undertaken. This is you can see from this slide that in fact there are 3 agricultural units with a pointer. I'll try and highlight it. This is number 2, which was application site. You've got the blue line, shows the line of their control. That's number 3, which sits over there, and you've got number 1 here. So that's the house where the pointer is that you'll see in the slides, and this is the application site. That's just zooming in a bit further. So again, you can see the proposed shed, and that's the front elevation of the house you'll see in the slide shortly. And that just shows the proposed slurry scraping passage that could run down to the slurry store, which we saw on site, which is here. Building here shows the east elevation would be open, and unfortunately I can't really make out the details, but that's the sections through the site. So only a very small area of underbuilding would take place, around about 700 mil in that area there, and then by this time you're actually coming to some level of cut into the existing ground. It was established that the earth mound would be removed to actually put the new shed in. The slurry goon lies beyond. That's the property of number 1, which would be facing towards the shed. The shed would just sit more or less in line with the other building you can see in the distance. That's view from the field. And looking down the other way down to where you would actually see the south elevation of the shed. This is the main access to the farm where there's no proposed change. That's a more distant view as you actually come up from the main road to the Robb site. So the site would be sitting in here where that soil mound would be removed, and you'd have the shed area there.
Any points of clarification on the slides? Members, now in session. David.
Thanks, Chair. Just in 4.6, it talks about the proposed shed as a reasonable size. And reading through the paperwork, I get the impression that there's a mix-up between what's a reasonable size for a farm and what's a reasonable size for housing. And I think certainly I'm concerned that this shed, it's nearly 43 metres long. And another downside is that the open side of the building is facing the house across the road of the objector. He talked about smell and that sort of thing is not going to change, and that might be fairly factual. But I would have thought that noise would have been increased in that area as well, and that's not necessarily just for 2 or 3 hours a day. It could be, I would assume that the cattle will be kept in there over the winter period and moved out for milking and that sort of thing. So I think that the size of proposed shed, although it's put in here as a reasonable size, I don't think it's a reasonable size to sit across private property. And I would certainly move that we do not approve this, we refuse this application.
Good.
Certainly one thing was raised on site, which was, it's maybe not so much the size of the shed as the orientation of the shed that members saw on site, that go back to the overall grouping of it. Certainly a number of members expressed the view on site that because of particular orientation here, that if it was turned at 90 degrees, it would have a far lesser impact. It wouldn't maybe sit so nicely in terms of the cluster of the buildings that you see there, but certainly with that, the effect on this property there. So as far as that goes, certainly I think if you have concerns, it would be to do with the siting and the orientation of it. It's not an unduly large agricultural shed. We regularly see far larger sheds coming in than that. I take on board the comment about the open-sided nature, because that would, together with the orientation of it, mean that you've got the potential for increased noise and probably a concentration of odour, whereas it might be blown away if it was in the field. If you had cattle there, you're actually keeping cattle in the shed, and therefore you're intensifying it. And I think another thing which was mentioned as well on site was the concern about potential for light pollution, that if you've got lights on there 24 hours a day with the cattle as well, facing straight into the house. Obviously, again, we come back down to the issue of balance. Past officers have recommended approval on this. I think it could be quite properly taken view by the committee that you've concerns about the siting, the orientation of it, the open side there, in terms of the effect of noise, odour, potential for light pollution. If those are your concerns, I would certainly say these are competent grounds to put forward if you wish to recommend for refusal.
Ivor?
Chair, I have similar concerns to Councillor McKee. The size didn't really bother me. It was the fact that the open side was actually straight across towards the house. If you get cattle starting roaring, there's no other escape for the sound other than out through there. I think it would be a material land use conflict with the housing. If it was orientated the other way, I think that would give them an option to, the noise wouldn't be as intrusive, and as I said, the smells and that could be blown away. So I would support Councillor McKee on the grounds that it is a land use conflict. The general amenity would be affected to the existing house. Noise, odours, and possible fumes, light pollution.
Peter?
I'd just like to reiterate that as well, but I just wonder whether if you do turn it 90 degrees, you're still going to get the effect of anything that's happening in that building with the prevailing wind to the objector. So I would suggest that find somewhere completely different.
Jim?
I would certainly support Councillor McKee. I feel that on the grounds of residential amenity, it would be extremely detrimental.
Any other member? Go with the recommendation? Okay, I know.
Just
I know. The recommendation for the motion.
I think it's been agreed to refuse this application on the grounds that the siting and orientation of the proposed agricultural building, together with the open-sided design on its east elevation, would have an unduly adverse effect on the amenity enjoyed by the neighbouring residents by virtue of loss of aspect and increased noise, odour and potential light pollution.
Go to item 8 on the agenda. The Kipp Forest Lodges, Kipp Paddock, Kippford, Dalbeattie, 14/B/2/0272. And speaking for this is Judith. Judith, you want to run through your slides?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, first of all, could I just point out an error in the report? It's on page 69, at paragraph 4.5, and it's the last sentence. It should say, it is not considered that there would be any significant loss of sunlight or increase in shade at neighbouring properties. Moving on to the slides. This shows the application site. It's adjacent to Kipp Paddock, which has 9 lodges situated in it at the moment. It's about 4 kilometres south of Dalbeattie and just north, about 500 metres north of the village of Kippford on the main access road, well, adjacent to the main access road. Moving on to the block plan, the application site is at the bottom. I'll see if I can use the pointer. Yeah, this is the application site here. This is the existing lodges are situated around a pond in here. I'll show you the slides later. In here is Doon Park, Caravan Park, and then the Kippford Holiday Park up here. And this is the main road from Kilfillan to Dalbeattie, and this is the access road to Kippford down here. This is Kipp Paddock layout at the moment, with the pond in the centre. The road down to Kippford is here, and this is the site at the side. You can see the position of the lodge, the new access road, and the parking and turning area. There was originally an application in 2003 for 12 lodges on that site. There were actually only 9 were erected, and I've discussed this at paragraphs 1.6 and 4.9 of my report. The section AA in the top corner of the slide shows the difference in levels from the roadway to the lodge, which would be about 3.5 metres, as in the lodge would be about 3.5 metres higher than the road, and that would be about the finished floor level of the proposed lodge would be about 2 metres higher than the finished floor level of the adjacent lodges. Moving on to lodge plans and sections, you can see most of the accommodation is on the ground floor. There's a bedroom, dressing room and bathroom in the roof space. There's decking at ground floor level and a balcony in under the overhang of the roof at first floor level. The finishes to the lodge would be the external walls would be natural log finish, green felt shingles to roof, and timber double glazed windows. This is a view taken towards Kipp Paddock from just across the road at the entrance to Riverview Lodges, and you can see the entrance to Kipp Paddock just on the right-hand side of the picture. This is at the entrance to Kipp Paddock. You can see some of the other lodges in the distance, and the application site is just in here, set against the hill behind, just where the sign is. This is the pond in here. This is taken just a bit in the access road with the pond on the left-hand side, and I've indicated where the site is, and you can see 2 of the existing lodges just on the right-hand side. This is the view taken over the site. So the position of the chalet would be just in the foreground, with the access would be running along just in front of the side of the laurel hedge, and then round in front of the dike there. So the lodge would be in here. The key considerations in the assessment of this application included the principle of the development, the impact on the landscape character and scenic quality of the area, including the regional scenic area, and the impact of the proposal on neighbouring properties. As detailed in my report, the proposal is considered to be in accordance with the development plan policies and is recommended for approval subject to the conditions as detailed.
Members, questions for the plan officer? Patsy?
Can I just ask, in the report you talk about accommodation in the roof space, and one of the objections is that they're considering it to be a 2-storey lodge. Can you just tell me what you mean by accommodation in the roof space that doesn't make it a 2-storey building?
Yeah.
Thank you. Generally, I would consider a 2-storey would be where the walls would go up 2 stories so that the eaves where the gutters would be below that level would be the windows. So that would be 2-storey. With 1.5-storey the level of the gutters would generally run across the windows, maybe about halfway. So I would consider that single story because if you look at the eaves, all the accommodation of the first floor is above that.
Hi, Chair. It's just on page 67 for the representations. A letter from the Planning Authority dated July 2009. Have you got a copy of that letter? It says it precludes siting of further units on that site.
You read?
Yes, I have a copy of that letter, and the letter is on the website. Shall I explain what's in the letter? The letter was written by a previous manager, Mr. Irving, in response to enforcement issues. And it says that although there were 12, and my understanding of it, interpretation of it, is that although there were 12 units were originally granted planning permission, there would be no enforcement taken for the fact that there were only 9 units. It says, I consider that the layout which has been formed precludes the siting of any further units within the application site, and any attempt to site further units without a further planning application will be challenged. I think that's the bit that's seen as relevant to this application.
Wasn't 4.9, David. Any other member? Any for plan officer? We've got a few objectors here wishing to speak. Remind the objectors and the speakers they've got 3 minutes, and I'll let them know when they've got 30 seconds to go. Going to have first Lawrence Wilson speaking on behalf of Wendy Bainbridge. Thanks, Lawrence. I'll let you know in 30 seconds to go.
Good morning, Chair. Lawrence Wilson, Planning Consultant, Dumfries. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this application. Do feel that the application is very contradictory in the report. Well, the council has been good enough to raise the first issue. This is in fact a 2-storey building, and I wonder if you'd mind going back to the photograph, please, or showing the elevations. Meanwhile, I'll carry on. And formation of an access track. Well, the formation of the access track and the clear felling of most of the trees has taken place. So really, it's a retrospective planning application, I would say, in the expectation of a consent. We can see that the second floor does show on that drawing, top left corner, a large balcony forming the second floor. The first floor of the building, or the 2-floor building, compared with the single-story building as existing. My understanding of that letter that was read out by the case officer was that Mr. Irving wished to retain an amenity area on the site, and the amenity area at that time, I believe, was that rectangular site. It formed a barrier between the existing lodges on the site and the trees at the higher level. The contradiction, I suppose, in this would be that issue, but it would also be the issue where the case officer says in paragraph 4.3, regarding the policy 0.1 states that proposals should respect, protect, or enhance the region's rich landscape character. Well, although we have a new local plan, the landscape character stays the same. The amenity of the adjoining property stays the same, and this really does detract from the amenity of the area. As I say, the trees have been clear felled, and the site has been cut out. So effectively, this is contrary to what ought to happen, and it will be a 2-storey dwelling house. I'm fairly sure of that, albeit a lodge. Equally, the case officer also says that that there would not be considered to be a significant
30 seconds,
adverse impact on the landscape. Well, I would disagree with that entirely. I would therefore suggest to you that the interpretation of the policies it's not just as accurate as one would like, and that the application be refused on the grounds that it's detrimental to the amenity of the area and the adjoining property. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm much obliged to you.
Thanks, Lawrence. Members? Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, sir. Mr Wilson made reference to the fact that clear felling of certain trees. I take it that he would accept that since trees were not protected in any way, that there was no impediment, as it were, to that course of action taking place.
As you would have said in an earlier application on that particular issue, correct. But on the issue of the amenity of the area, well, I think it does have an adverse effect on the area. But you are correct, Councillor.
Grateful for the response, sir. Thank you.
Any other members? Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you very much, Chair. Much obliged.
Mr John Ewart, objector. You've got to say, Mr Ewart, say I'll let you know 30 seconds to go. 3 minutes.
Morning. Kipp Paddock was originally developed in 2003 as an extension to Kippford Holiday Park, with permission to form static caravan pitches. 9 twin holiday unit log cabins, which were manufactured and sold to conform to the Caravan Sites and Controlled Development Act, were sited and are now privately owned, and each holding its own caravan site licence, leaving only Plot 10 as part of Kippford Holiday Park. In 2009, a letter from Planning Department stated that the layouts precluded the siting of any further units. I act as the management agent for the 9 present holiday log cabins within Kipp Paddock, as well as being the owner of 2. When we purchased the log cabins, we all agreed to a deed of conditions, which was written by the developer, ensuring that no one would ever be able to change the appearance excuse me, of any of the log cabins within the paddock, ensuring that they would remain identical, indeed, to prevent any of us citing the type of structure that's proposed for Plot 10. And as the management agent, it's my responsibility to enforce this. The proposed construction is not a caravan as defined under the Caravan Sites and Controlled Development Act, and is in fact a dwelling house, which has no place on a caravan park. In the Planning Department's recommendation to allow the development, it states that there will be no environmental impact. This is because all the mature trees on sites were felled only a few months before the application was made, contrary to the original permission. I've copied all the relevant documents if anybody would like to see them. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? No members got any further questions? Thanks, Mr Ewart. Could I have Mrs Judith Ewart, please? Same, Judith. You've got 3 minutes and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Okay. This application should not have been heard under the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997, but under the Caravan Sites and Control of Development Act 1960 and 1968. Kipp Paddock Kippford is a licensed caravan park with permission from the Council for caravan pitches. Caravan Site Licence Number DGK/CS46. The legal requirements for a log cabin to be classed as a caravan is as follows. The caravan is defined by law as a structure designed or adapted for human habitation, capable of being moved from one place to another, and this includes twin units, and our log cabins are twin units. A caravan is composed of not more than 2 sections separately constructed and designed to be assembled on a site by means of bolts, clamps, or other devices, and is, when assembled, physically capable of being moved by road from one place to another, whether by being towed or by being transported by a motor vehicle or trailer. The caravan should not exceed length 60 feet, width 20 feet, or the overall height of living accommodation measured internally from floor at the lowest to the ceiling at the highest of 10 feet. All the log cabins in the paddock all comply to this legislation. All the log cabins already in the paddock also meet requirements of national planning policy framework. All the owners of the log cabins already in situ have all the legal requirements being adhered to at all times. And all the owners at Kipp Paddock take exception to a house being built in their caravan park, a house which will not have the legal requirements of a caravan in a caravan site. Again, under the Control and Development Act 1960 and 1968.
Thanks, Judith.
Okay.
Members? Come back. Okay, I don't think there's anybody want to any questions, so you're fine, isn't it? Ms. Harper, please.
Chair.
Remind you as well, but 3 minutes and I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
I'm speaking on behalf of the owners of lodges 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8 and 9. Also 2 residents in Kipp Mews Cottage and Kipp House itself. If I could refer to the photographs which I submitted earlier. The first photograph is a general view of the unobtrusive roofs and lodges currently in Kipp Paddock. Number 2, again from the entrance to the paddock, very low-level buildings. Number 3, panorama inside the paddock showing lodges 4, 5 and 6. Number 4, lodges 3, 4 and 5. Number 5, lodges 1 and 2. You get the impression. Number 6 is an elevated panorama, lodges 3, 4 and 5. Number 7 is an elevated picture showing a typical lodge, which is number 10. They're all the same. They've always been the same. Now, if I can move to number 8, this is more significant. What this shows, it's an elevated picture. If you're looking directly in front of where the photograph is taken to, it's the proposed development site. Currently empty. Now, I've taken the liberty of using Photoshop to show what an existing lodge in there would look like if we can go to photograph number 9. Doesn't look terribly different from the rest of the lodges there. It is to scale, taking into account the fact that it's a little bit further back. Now, number 10, what is proposed will look like this. There's no business there. It's far too big. It looks nothing like any of the other lodges. That is going to sit, that thing is 20 feet high, and we heard it was 2 meters above the level of the other lodges. Now, that can be seen from the road. Anyone entering or leaving Kippford is going to have their eye drawn to that. And I personally think that it clashes totally with what is in the paddock at the moment. Finally, just as an example, if I can move to the next photograph, this is a small cul-de-sac in Heath Hall. If we can go to the next one. Would you allow that in there? Back one. Forward. Same thing. Doesn't belong there.
30 seconds, Bruce.
Right. I feel that we have gone a fair bit of the way. We are not objecting, and I speak for most of the people who have put objections in. I believe there's 20 in total. We're not objecting to a lodge being built there, but please could we have one the same as what is there that will fit in with everyone else's, rather than something which is completely different. I feel that we've gone 66% of the way there, and we're quite happy with that, but we all object strongly against what is proposed. Thank you.
Members, Ivor.
Don't by any chance have a Photoshop of a log cabin sitting the other way. You put the smallest aspect out the way rather than the long one, which might have made a difference. If you had that one sighted the other way with the widest angle out, it might have made a difference, because that does make a significant impact on a small one against putting it widthways.
what I would say is, even if it was to allow one of these cabins to be sited, if it was, the aspect was changed, we'd still be happy with that, because it would be lower. It would be so much lower. These are only the other one's 6 meters high from its base to the top, and to fit them in, you'll see that the lodges are all at different angles, and if one was at a slightly different angle up there, or even turned through 180 degrees, or sorry, 90 degrees, it would still have a much lesser impact than what is proposed.
Peter?
You haven't got a photograph from the road with your new lodge there, have you?
Unfortunately, I haven't. I mean, we do have one from the road, and if we could imagine, I think it's photograph number 2, I think. There. Now, where that lodge is right in the middle between the gates, if you look to the right of that, now where the top of the roof line is, moving slightly to the right, that would be the baseline for the new lodge, which then goes up 20 feet from the top of that lodge. Yeah, where the point, well, actually where the pointer was there, can we have the pointer up a wee bit? Because we're talking about the baseline is in line with the roof of the existing lodge. The base is there, and then there's 6 meters or 20 feet to go above that.
Did I just ask that? You finished, Peter? Finished? Could I just ask, you put that one of the Photoshop up there with the proposed lodges there now. Are we pretty sure that was accurate?
I can assure you that the scales are
accurate.
Absolutely accurate, yeah.
That's fine, thanks. Alistair?
Thanks, and I'd like to thank Mr. Harper for his entertaining presentation. It's informative. One thing that the applicant has said, though, is that because of the slope into which the proposed building is set, this mitigates the setback. So, sorry, the slope. The argument is this mitigates the impact. Has the objector got anything to say about that? Maybe we could have another quick look at the particular slide.
So I'm not clear on the point that we're trying to discuss here.
The ground slopes up behind the site of the proposed building. Is that sufficient grounds to mitigate any impact that's because of the extra height, because of the slope behind it?
I don't think that the area behind, which is ancient woodland, make a lot of difference to that, because no one's going to see it from there. We're more concerned about the aspect to the front. Now, I mean, the trees are 60 feet high, so it will make no difference to the rear, but to the front, because of its height, significant difference.
Any other member? Thank you, Bruce. Fine. Members, we're now in session. Oh, sorry. Sorry, the applicant here, it's Robin Aston, applicant. So mind you, Robin, you've got 3 minutes, 30 seconds. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
A number of written and spoken objections are made, which I'll seek to cover some of. I'd like, though, to set out my credentials, perhaps. For 15 years, David Bellamy Gold Award for my business. In fact, we were founder members of that for Dumfries and Galloway. TripAdvisor Certificate of Excellence relevant to one inquiry. Assisting in publishing of Birds of Dumfries and Galloway for 5 years, financing that. I built what one objector described as the much sought after and well-established location. In short, what I do well. Contrary to allegations that all present lodges share the same footprint, there are 3 designs and sizes. The proposed will be a 4th in size and shape, and by the same manufacturer, and largely of the same materials, it will fit in well. And the option to develop this 10th plot was always clear. Reference made to title deeds of property requiring unified maintenance of lodges failed to mention that every lodge owner, everyone, waived right and title to object should I alter or develop the remaining land as I see fit, subject to planning legislation, of course. Clause 8 of the deed that they were all accepted is available should the committee wish to see it. That makes reference to the point. It was alleged I have no concern for conservation of the natural environment, but in addition to what I mentioned earlier, there were 8 closely growing trees. Many were shallow rooted, significant danger to occupiers in a storm such as last year's. One objector was the first to fell one of these trees, and I did follow suit. They would have crushed any lodge in their path. One fabulous beech tree remains in the property of another objector. It was always the specimen tree of the area. I will re-landscape beautifully. That is what I do. Contrary to comments made about removal of trees exposing skyline, there won't be any issues. Questions were raised about minimal benefit of my proposal for local area. This is something I take very seriously. I always monitor income. And at our business, this is my income sheet, 630,000
30 seconds, Robin.
Thank you. Spent by holidaymakers in the local area. I can vouch for that. I've told Scottish Enterprise and Visit Scotland how to do it. And I spend as much money in the area. I employ 13 staff. This proposal will assist them in their employment. Planning officers have determined my application does not conflict with planning guidelines. Objections cited children, access and safety, all of which I will do. So lastly, what I build and I landscape on the plot, I will do well.
Members? David?
Mr. Ashton, did you say there that the legislation that Mrs. Ewart spoke about is overridden or not applicable?
I believe it is.
Okay.
That's in relation to the right to object to an application that I might make. As to whether that actually would be considered by government, where they're trying to make sure that there can't be an agreement from time before that would stop people objecting now, is a moot point, but it is in the contract that they signed.
Peter?
Sorry, I was just wanting to get clarification on the same point. So you're saying that when they purchased the caravans, plots or whatever, they actually said that they would waive any right to object to anything else that was done on that site?
Shall I read part of the clause that's relevant? Holiday lodges, which is the name under which the properties were sold by myself, expressly reserve the right to dispose of any part of the lodge development area for such purposes holiday lodges may see fit, or to alter or modify in whole or in part the foregoing conditions, including without prejudice to the generality of the foregoing, the right to vary these presents so as to extend the definition of common parts to include internal roads, and in the event of holiday lodges doing so, no lodge proprietor shall have any right or title to object thereto, and shall have no claim in respect thereof. I missed a little bit earlier on.
Can I apologise for having to interrupt there. The title deeds are a separate matter to the planning application, and therefore it's not a matter that we can, the planning committee can take into consideration.
It only relates to whether they have a right law to object, but not to the fact that they bring an
It's not
objection.
relevant to the planning application before us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim?
I wonder if you would like to comment on the photo montage. In your opinion, is that a fair representation of what your proposed construction
Thank you for the
would look
opportunity.
like, and in terms of scale? What's your opinion of that?
In relation to the first picture, if I may, the one that showed an end on, yes, that's too far back. it would have to come forward. The length of the lodge wouldn't sit right into the plot like that, which is why I aspected the new lodge the other way around. If I could now see the proposed lodge. I accept the assurance that it is to scale because the assurance has been given. I suspect that its aspect may not be quite right. It might be at 20 degrees, the right-hand end twisted further back. And, of course, absolutely no landscaping is shown around it. In addition, it's coloured rather more strongly than the lodges further back. It's coloured about the same colour as the one in the foreground. So it does stand out more than I believe it would. And landscaping would enormously soften it. But I couldn't put in the standard product as shown. It wouldn't fit.
Thank you very much for that.
Jane?
Chairman, were this committee to give permission to this, can I ask the applicant, how does this arrive on site?
It arrives in pallets of logs, which are pre-cut in Norway and then erected on site.
Could I follow on from that? I have to say I'm deeply confused, and I think probably the officers have got to tell me. There's the difference between a house in the countryside, a lodge, and a caravan seems to me really very mysterious. One objector claimed that a caravan or a lodge has to arrive in two sections. I would like some help.
I think that will get answered when we get to session.
Yeah.
Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just in regards to what the use of the lodge, because we're talking caravans and lodges, this is clearly a lodge, is what you're saying, 106 metre square metre footprint, I think is what's being said. So the use of the lodge compared to what the use of the caravans are, what's the difference?
None. In terms of use, there'll be no difference. There's the recommendation from the planning officer is to put in restrictions that the lodge cannot be a permanent home. It can only be a second home, which is the same use that any of the present, I'll call them lodges, can be used as. Can be used all year round, but only as a second home. Does your question also relate to the issue of are the present ones caravans or lodges?
Yeah, it is in page 71, number 4, in the papers.
Okay, it was a question for the applicant, Chairman, rather. I'm aware of that, said to get his interpretation and to get reassurances from the applicant himself, and it was in regards to your second point as well. Because it's been made from the representation, you think it was a clear distinction, difference of use, and that's what I'm just trying to draw out, Chairman, that it is for the same uses that the caravans are, but clearly this is a much bigger building. That's just what I'm trying to establish and get in my mind.
Yeah, member? Jim?
Thank you, Chair. The photo montage which we've just viewed does not indicate any landscaping. What landscaping would be envisaged for the development?
My understanding is that that's entirely by separate negotiation. The landscaping that I do on the majority of my business involves the replanting of indigenous trees to an appropriate size. So if I'm looking for a 15-foot tree, then I'll find one in my other areas of woodland. But mostly I'm moving shrubs now, shrubs that were planted 20, 30 years ago and that are now 10 or 15 feet high, because generally it's lower level cover that's looked for. So where, for instance, my parents would have planted out a rhododendron bed with 2-foot high rhododendrons, they're now enormous. I do a lot of that. I bund the ground as well to give a little bit of height beforehand, but not just a ridge bund, which would dry out and would look false if there's space to allow it to be more gentle. So I'll take advice prior to coming to a formal suggestion to planning in regards to that clause, but that's what I do all over.
I assume this would produce a degree of screening.
Absolutely. The intention across any aspect of my business is firstly to give people a view and sunshine, and secondly to give them screening from other people.
Thanks, Bruce. We are now in session. Tom?
Thanks, Chairman. I think having heard from the objectors, they're not objecting to a development there per se. What they're objecting to is the current design. And I think...
is this a question for the...
I thought you said you're in session.
No, you put your hands up just as I was,
I
was saying
you said you're in session, that's why I put my hand up.
But you put your hand up just as I was going through that, like, so did Alice. Right. Right. Sorry, Bruce. We're now...
Am I off the hook?
Sorry, Robin. That's you concluded, you can now... we're concluded with you now, you can go back. Right, now members are in...
Right,
Tom.
thank you. Just to continue what I was started, I think that it would appear to be the objectors are not objecting to the total application. I think they're quite sympathetic to having something else there. It's the actual design of this particular cabin, or whatever we want to call it. So I think in this case I'd be moved to refuse it on the grounds it's detrimental to the amenity of the area and adjoining properties due to the height, massing and setting within the area, and I'm prepared to move that.
Alistair?
Well, I would be inclined to support Councillor McCauley, Chair, because I think that the points made by the objectors, I think are reasonable. I think they've been reasonably made. I mean, I do accept that. I mean, it's a real top quality site. I think what's weighed on me is the comment by the objectors to the effect that they are against this particular type of accommodation. Call it what you will, and my view is that while I accept that the photomontage, call it what you will, is in scale, I also accept that it can be mitigated and would be mitigated to an extent, but I still personally feel that it would be somewhat incongruous, as it were, to see it there, and therefore, I suppose, perhaps, maybe putting it slightly differently from Tom, the proposed lodge would dominate the area and would be out of keeping with other properties in the vicinity, and would certainly be detrimental, in my opinion, sir, to the amenity of the area. So to that extent, I'm sure Councillor McCauley and I can get a form of words on which we would agree, and I have no problems in supporting his motion.
I'm sorry about missing you out with your question before.
No, I'm just hoping that I might have got an answer, please, from the officers, just to help me with that, please.
David?
Basically, I can give assurances to both the members and indeed Mrs. Ewart that it is entirely correct to consider this under the Town and Country Planning Act. The reason for that is that under the Caravan Act, if what was being proposed was a caravan, because this is a licensed caravan site, it wouldn't need planning permission for it being sited. Just because you have a licensed caravan site doesn't mean that you can't put any other development on it. What it does mean is that if it falls out with the definition of a caravan under the Planning Act, you need to apply for planning permission, which is exactly what's happened here. So it's wholly accepted that what you've seen before you is not a caravan, it's a lodge, and therefore it's going to be assembled on site rather than in the two pieces which the Caravan Act allows. So that's why it requires an application, that's why it's before yourselves. Hopefully that's clear.
Okay, Jane? Jim?
Thanks, Chair. If ever a picture told 1,000 stories or 1,000 words, that was it. I mean, often shudder when we offered photomontages, but I think that help to focus members' minds on exactly what's being proposed. But I have a question it's kind of troubling me. We have a letter from a planning officer, a planning authority, saying that the chalets that are in existence at the moment concludes that a development site, and yet we have been asked to approve an extension now to that site, and I just wonder where we sit with that. And that, if you look at page 68, Principles of Development, Siting and Design, where we look at policy ED10, it talks about the council will support new groups of chalets, cabins, or camping sites. It doesn't talk about individual ones. So I wonder if David or Judith might want to just comment on that.
Well, I mean, again, paragraph 4.9 really gives you the issue about this. The comment that the former area planning manager made about this was that any attempt to site further units without a further grant of planning permission will be challenged. But obviously, this is an application. It's not a case that units have just been cited. In terms of policy, as I understand it, this is actually within the confines of the original planning permission, same site, in which case this is just an addition within that area rather than an extension of that original site boundary. Hopefully Judith can confirm that.
Thanks, Judith.
Thank you. I'm grateful to Mr. Sutty for his explanation of the caravan site, because I wondered if it did preclude any other structure going on there other than a caravan. Obviously it doesn't. But what I'm looking at is 4.6, which is to do with the Solway Coast Regional Scenic Area as defined in the Local Development Plan Policy NE2. And I would suggest that it does not comply with that, because I do think, rather like Councillor Geddes and Councillor Cochran, that the landscape character and scenic interest will be, and the amenity of that area will be affected by this development. And there seems to be no specific need for the development on the location other than a holiday cottage, which is perfectly all right. So I would suggest that it doesn't fit with policy NE2 as defined in the local development plan.
Ivor?
Chair, I might be on my own here, but I actually think that the application should be approved. I think you have to give enough chances to let people actually have different options when they go to a holiday park. I think the picture we had may not have been indicative of what it will look on site, and with no landscaping there, I find it difficult to judge. I actually would move that we approve the application.
Members?
I'm quite happy to second that for either.
Go to the, right, we go to the vote. We've got a motion and an amendment.
We do have a motion from Councillor McCautry, seconded by Councillor Geddes. I would just perhaps like a bit of clarification on the grounds for refusal, if that's at all possible.
Still no trade union terms will accept the composite.
To refuse the application as it was detrimental to the amenity of the area.
With your leave, Chair, I mean, I culled, you know, as it were, my comments, having heard the objectors from what they were really saying. They were talking about the proposed lodge dominating the area, being out of keeping with other properties in the vicinity, and having a detrimental effect on the amenity of the area as a consequence.
Thank you. And we have an amendment by Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor Groom, to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Councillor Martin?
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers?
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Motion.
Councillor Geddes?
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Groom,
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop,
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor, Councillor Maitland,
Motion.
Councillor McCautry,
Motion.
Councillor McComb,
Motion.
Councillor McKee,
Motion.
Councillor Witt, with a vote of 12 to 4, the motion has succeeded and the application will be refused on the grounds that it's detrimental to the amenity of the area. Thank you.
I can go in item 9, land to southwest of Plascow Farm, Dalbeattie, 14-P/2/0360. And we've got Dean Clarkworthy. Yes. Want to go, Dean? You go? No.
Okay, just to explain a little bit of the background, this application relates to 3 turbines that were previously approved by this committee in March this year. Those 3 turbines were approved at 74 metres high to tip, with 24-metre long blades or rotors and 50-metre hub. This proposal is for this. The only difference between this proposal and what was approved is that the blade length, the rotor length, is to be increased, or is proposed to be increased to 26.5 metres, thereby resulting in a 2.5 metre increase in the height to tip from base. All other aspects of the application remain as approved. Paragraph 1.6 of the report summarises the reasons the application has been submitted. Essentially, it relates to advice received by the applicant post permission in March. The turbine manufacturer, having scrutinised the wind resource and the information collated from the monitoring masts, and once approval had been approved, looked at the proposal and has advised the applicant that this turbine is now proposed is the turbine that's advised for this site. The former turbine, not, well, the applicant will explain it here, I understand. He'll explain the precise reasons, but that's the reason. Is the manufacturer, the provider of the turbine, is advised this is the correct turbine for this site. So it's essentially this presentation is what was produced before with just the slight alterations. So that's a site, 3 turbines aligned northwest, southeast, about 180 metres apart. Dalbeattie is down there in the left-hand corner. It's about 4 kilometres from the site. The nearest residential property is Kirkcaswell Farm, about 560 metres from the site. There's a site in greater detail. You see the positions of each of the 3 turbines. Access road, as formally approved, in from the minor road up on the right-hand side there. This is the turbine now proposed. Same as the other in all respects apart from the blade length. So it's a tubular steel tower. Blade length increased to by 2.5 metres in this case. That's the zone of theoretical visibility taken from the approved scheme, because essentially the ZTV for the proposed scheme is the same. There are very minor additional areas that the turbines will be visible, but they relate to the Solway Firth, and you wouldn't actually see them on this image if I was to put that up. So that's generally the visibility to hub of the proposed and the approved scheme. These images are taken from the submission. What they do, if you see them as a paper hard copy, is that it compares the approved scheme with the proposed scheme, the approved scheme being the picture at the top. Unfortunately, they're not coming out too clearly on these images, but they are there. There's 3 aligned above the shed in the middle left. And again, this is a comparative view, this time from a position near Cogonion, around 2.7 kilometres from the nearest turbine. Again, top is as approved, bottom is as proposed. And we're getting further away now, so it's getting increasingly difficult to make the comparative, but you do see them clearly on the original hard copy. Top being the view from south of Beeswing, the same view at the bottom, but compared to the bottom one being the proposed scheme. This is 3.7 kilometres from the site. And the last one we're putting is from one of the nearby properties, Plascow Cottage, around 615 metres from the site to the sort of northeast of the site. The top image being as approved and the bottom being as proposed. You can make out the hubs, I think, on the bottom one just about. This hub is the same height, so same hub position, just the blade length is marginally increased. And these are just general views across the site. This is the site looking down towards the site, or certainly towards Plascow Cottage. The previous image was from is just to the right of that cluster of trees there on the left. And panning left from that previous image, this is looking across the site in the middle foreground there. And panning left again, just giving you an impression of the actual characteristics of the site where the approved turbines and the proposed turbines would be. Again, that's the last one, panning left. This is an image of the existing field gate where the access would be taken on this proposal along the minor road past Plascow Cottage there in the distance. That's looking up the site along the proposed access track. And this is an image from the other side of the valley. So we're looking east from the opposite side of the valley this is just to give a general impression of the general characteristics of the landscape in the broader area. It'd be the site is actually on the sort of mid slope with the higher peaks you can see on the horizon. And this is panning left from that. That's Crichton there, the highest point on the horizon there. That's taken from the previous. It's not very good. It's even further away from the site at Beckonside Hill, and the site is in the middle foreground there. And that's all I've got to say at this point.
Members? We have no objectors wishing to speak. We have the applicant, Rory Young. Just remind you, Rory, you've got 3 minutes. I'll let you know, 30 seconds to go.
Good morning. My name is Rory Young. I'm the applicant. The reason for this slightly amended application is that during detailed due diligence of the site, it was concluded that the development's durability and efficiency could be significantly improved by marginally increasing the blade length of the turbines from 24 to 26.5 metres. This is the only change we are seeking. The tower and hub heights would remain unchanged. The current consent is based on an Enercon E48, which was recommended by the turbine manufacturer at the time of the initial planning application in 2008. Following approval of this application in March 2014, more comprehensive analysis to assess wind resource, turbulence and wind shear were undertaken. These assessments are to confirm the suitability of the site for the candidate turbine and to allow the bank to assess the site's financial feasibility. These assessments will not be carried out by the manufacturer until full planning consent, a grid connection and met mass data is available. The result has been to reclassify the site as a Class 3 site rather than the previously thought Class 2 site. This does not mean that the site is no longer viable, but rather that the model of turbine that should ideally be erected is slightly different. The result of the turbine model change would be a substantial improvement in the development's capacity factor and energy yield by approximately 15%, or 900,000 kilowatt hours per year, the equivalent of the annual demand of almost 200 homes. Furthermore, this more suitable turbine for the wind conditions will last longer with less maintenance, and will also result in a quieter turbine than the current consented model. No consultees have had any concerns with the 2.5 metre increase, and I welcome the Planning Department's recommendation for approval. The Council's landscape architect has stated that the difference between the approved and the proposed turbines is, and I quote, unlikely to be appreciable on the ground. He also comments, it's worth noting that the revised turbines would still be within the medium typology and therefore consistent with the guidance and assessment in the DGWLCS. As the Planning Department and the Council landscape architect have stated, this change still represents a development that is in accordance with Dumfries and Galloway development plan policies. I feel it's very important to highlight to you that I'm not a wind farm developer, rather a local farmer who's looking to maximise the use of his farm, whilst at the same time ensuring local community and local economy can benefit as much as possible. To that end, local contractors have already spent 4 months working on site, and at a recent community meeting, it was decided to appoint Stewart to Council of Voluntary Services as the body that would set up and run the local trust. In summary, this application to change the turbines from 74 to 76.5 metres tall represents an increase of 2.5 metres, approximately 3%, and is being driven by the turbine manufacturer for technical reasons identified during detailed due diligence. There are no further proposed changes to the application. I'd like to thank you for your time, and if you have any questions or would like to see any technical documents from the manufacturer to support what I've said today, I'd be happy to.
Members? Jim?
No, I just want to speak when you're in session, Chair.
Thanks, Rory.
There's also some hard copies here of the montages if people struggle to see them on the screen.
Thanks, Rory. Members are now in session. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Just for the avoidance of doubt and to give you a reassurance, Chair, top of page 78, there's a Stewart Dempster, an objector. No relative of mine, and I've never met the gentleman. And just to show there's no sympathy towards my namesake, given the modest adjustment or amendment proposed, I propose we go with the officer recommended.
Everyone agreed? Agreed? David?
Chair, I've got concerns here. The first thing I've got to complain about is the state of these pictures we're getting. And it's been happening for a long time. You're showing turbines. And although I wear glasses, I don't think they're that bad. I can't see them. So we need to do something with these pictures so that it can be seen properly, albeit they're a different colour to what may be erected. But we need to be able to see them to make a decision based on the factual situation as it is. And another concern I've got is that a manufacturer has, we're getting advice and a planning application, and we give permission for it, then they come back and want to increase it by about 2.5 metres. And although you've nothing taken to match it with the likes of trees and whatnot, that somebody can measure it with trees, you can see how much extra it's above those trees. And I don't think that we're in that situation here. So I think it's causing concern that we're maybe making decisions based on improper information, if you like. And I don't know how we address that, but I'll leave that to you and the planners to sort that out. But if we could do something about the pictures as well, we'd be greatly obliged.
David?
Thank you, Chair. Rock and hard place here, and we're caught in the middle. Frankly, I would not like to show pictures at committee of turbines. I really don't like showing pictures up on these walls. I'll tell you why. Because the photo montages which are produced are actually designed to be viewed on paper format at a specific distance. They really shouldn't be shown up here at all because they are misleading. But if we don't show pictures to the committee, then we get complaints that you're not seeing the pictures. What I would suggest is, what we can do is, in the week running up to the committee in the members' lounge, we can put the appropriate images there. We've done that 1 or 2 times recently, and I think that's probably the best way. They are online. They're all available online for people to see. But as soon as you start putting a projection, I mean, the projectors here are not wonderful. We've got a screen in front of us which keeps flicking on and off as well, which doesn't help. But when you're putting a white turbine against a white background, it's very, very difficult to show it. So maybe the simplest thing is we just don't show them at all, because that would actually be probably better, because it will encourage you to actually look at the genuine hard copies, because they are not meant to be looked at on a big screen like that. They are meant to be looked at a certain arm's length distance, and to do otherwise can actually be a bit misleading. But members in the past have made it clear that they would rather see the montages on the screen. So I'm in your hands which you prefer. We can't improve the quality of the pictures that you're seeing up there, because the ones, to be honest, when the screen is working here, they look okay on this screen. It's as soon as they go up on the wall, it's like a white cat on a snowstorm. You just can't see it, I'm afraid.
Jay?
And that might also increase the number of site visits we get as well. So I'm quite happy actually seeing them on the pictures that we actually get. I mean, I've got no problem with the application and things like that. As Jock says, originally when we gave this application, there was a lot of work done with the applicant and the officers to move. I can remember this application coming before us. I do, however, have this hate of people saying that it's equivalent to 200 homes that we can give electricity. That's if it's gone full belt, 365 a year and things like that. However, with regards to the application itself, I've got no problem with going with the recommendation.
Tom?
Well, I mean, I do have a problem. I objected to it the last time, and this is actually a worse situation than the last time. But I'm no daft enough to move an amendment. It's fairly obvious we didn't get a seconder this time. And in view of the vote the last time, I'm not going to waste any time. But I do take exception to the fact that someone can be granted and then a matter of 2 or 3 months later we come back in for an amendment. And I would hope this doesn't become a regular occurrence, these type of applications. And I've got to agree with what Councillor McKee was saying about the display there. It maybe help even better if we actually sent them out to members in the hard copy. And that way we've got the time to study them, because it's all very well saying we'll put them up in the members' lounge there, but not every councillor comes in here. You know, some members do travel from Sanquhar, and they're maybe only in here on the day of the meeting. I see nothing wrong with sending them out in hard copy to members. In fact, we can make a bit of money and hire them out to Specsavers for eye testing, because they are very testing. We do try and look at them.
David?
Well, I have to say that goes entirely counter to the movement of having everything going electronic. I mean, this is why we put them online and we receive the electronic submissions that way. So cost-wise, we simply we don't get given paper copies very often for these applications, so we wouldn't have the capability to print it out and send it to members, I'm afraid.
Jim? Is it Gail?
Yeah, just very briefly, I wouldn't want us to use any more money printing off paper copies. I think if we can have them available in the members' lounge, I'll be happy with that. And if there's specific members who have problems accessing that, they could perhaps contact the planning officer directly.
Should we digress a wee bit here?
Just to conclude that the application has been approved subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Agreed. We'll take a half-hour break for lunch. Come back at 1 o'clock. Dumfries 14/P/3/0403. And we've got Claire X to run us through the slides. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for planning permission in principle for residential development on a 0.06 hectare site within Auldgirth, which lies on the eastern side of the A76. This photograph shows the aerial photograph of the site, highlighted with the yellow arrow. These are the location plan with the site area outlined in red, which also includes the shared access road. And this here is an indicative site layout for 2 houses with car parking adjoining it. This is a Google Street View of the site. Just shows it in the sort of springtime, just to give a comparison to the next photograph, which was taken recently, which shows the trees without their leaves. So this is looking along the site frontage of the A76, looking towards the sort of Auldgirth, sort of southern turn off into Auldgirth, with the application site to the left, behind the dyke wall and the trees, and then panning again left of the previous photograph, showing the shared access road. So this is looking across the site from the southern corner. So this is looking northwards, and you can see the junction of the onto the A76 is marked by the sort of white fence in the centre. And this is, sorry, panning right from the previous photograph, and that's looking towards the property Park Lane, which is one of the modern bungalows north of the site. And again, right again. And then this is right again from the previous photograph, looking at properties 1 and 2 Hayfield. And then this is looking from, right again from the previous photograph along the southern boundary with 7 Hayfield. This is just taken from the front of 2 Hayfield towards the application site boundary with 7 Hayfield on the left. That's marked by the hedge. And then just panning right again from the previous photograph, and you can see property Park Lane, more modern bungalow on the right. And this is looking up towards the application site on the right, with the property 1 and 2 Hayfield on the left-hand side. And then this is looking down from the same position down towards the junction along the shared access road onto the A76 with the front garden of green leaf on the right-hand side. So everything's set out fully. Full assessment of the report is set out. Proposal set out in the committee report. But in summary, the proposal, subject to the conditions noted, is considered to comply with the new local development plan policy H2 for housing development in villages, and therefore recommendation to approve is put.
Members, any questions for Claire? Archie?
Just considering earlier on about the drive up to the one that we had in number 1, is this a road owned by the council, or is it a third person that owns it, a third organisation?
The application site includes this road as well, so it's in the ownership and control of the applicant. So obviously there will be, if you look down, pacing towards the A76, there will be improvements. I think the trunk roads have asked for the first 10 metres back approved.
Any other member? Stephen?
Thank you. And just on the extent, on the privateness of the road, I noticed there was a street light at the far end. Is that where is that section adopted?
I'll need to check, but as far as I'm aware, the road isn't adopted. It is a private road. But I would need to check.
If you went back to the picture you just showed before, there was a for sale sign. Aye, just there. So is that something that maybe you could? Again, I'm just the reason why I'm asking is there seems to be an awful lot of these anomalies where we're providing street lighting, etc., on private roads, and they seem to have cropped up in quite a few recent planning application committees. So I don't know if it's the rule rather than the exception, or the other way around now. But it was just really to ask about that. Thank you.
That's all right, David.
I mean, in short, we wouldn't, as planning officers, know about the adoption of roads or street lighting, but I would guess that if it is, it's a historical anomaly. Certainly, as far as I'm aware, the road is not adopted. Just by looking at it, it's not of an adoptable standard. Maybe the applicant can actually clarify that, but the very fact they've put that area in their application site would tend to indicate that it's not an adopted road, privately owned.
I think there need to be a footpath in that. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to check the accuracy of a word in the report, paragraph 4.4. The proposal is considered as infill of this part of the village rather than ribbon development, as there is the physical barrier of the A76 to the east. Does that not mean to the west?
Yes, I'm afraid you picked up on that mistake. I'm very good with my east and west. I apologise.
Sorry, we weren't doing the never eat shredded wheat as I was taught at school. Should have got that one.
Remember? Yeah.
Thanks, Chairman. It's just it's a question. I think the agents maybe still to speak, but in regards to some of the representations, they're saying that the scale of the development's too large in comparison to what's been to what's existing. I think it's pretty much picked up 3.10 in the representations. Just have we got any outline or indicative kind of proposals? I think it's plan in principle. Did we see that earlier? I missed that if we did.
Ask the applicant to address that one. No one members? We've no one wishing to speak as an objector. Could we have Angus Dodds? Angus Dodds speak as the applicant. Angus, you get 3 minutes. I'll let you know 30 seconds to go.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thanks very much for allowing me to speak. My name's Angus Dodds. I'm a planning consultant from Smithscore. I think in general terms, on behalf of our client, we'd just like to echo and amplify the commentary and the analysis in Claire's report, which is before you, which we feel is, in general terms, comprehensive and a fair assessment of the application against the current adopted local development plan. As set out in the report, I would agree that the application accords with the spatial strategy of the local development plan, and in particular with policy H2, housing development in villages. I'm mindful of the committee clerk's initial comments that it's not for speakers to reiterate what's already in the report, so maybe I can move on to some of the issues raised by the members. In terms of the road access, I acknowledge that Transport Scotland in their consultation response had asked for visibility displays of 4.5 metres by 215 metres in both directions from the junction of the road with the A76. In the northern direction, we can't at present achieve the 215 metres, but we can achieve 190 metres, and the client is very happy with the way that Condition 8 is drafted. And I can also confirm that we've already instructed a consultant civil engineer to engage Transport Scotland on relaxing their standard for this. They feel that this will be easy enough to achieve, and they're currently going through the set procedure from Transport Scotland to do that. We've also checked the crash map data for the junction, and there's been no either slight, serious or fatal crashes at the junction with the A76 over the last 5 years from 2009. The remarks to do with the adoption or otherwise of the road, as far as I'm concerned, well, as far as I'm aware, the road is not adopted and it is within the control of our clients. That's as much as I know, but I believe it is under the control of our clients, and we are quite happy to go along with conditions 8 and 9, which deal with road amendments. The final point I would make in reference to Councillor Crother's point about the design of the houses, it is an indicative plan, but we feel it shows something that's in keeping with the scale and the development pattern of the village. And I think there are other examples locally in Park and also in Dalswinton where you have that the tight relationship between houses built quite hard up against the road boundary, and I think it is in keeping and in character with the
30 seconds, Angus.
Thank you. With the Dumfriesshire vernacular. Obviously, it is a PPP application, however, so any designs will need to come forward in due course. The final point I would ask is whether members would consider removing the second phrase of condition 3A, as we feel condition 3B already covers off the issue of design appropriately, and by removing that second phrase, it may allow for further flexibility in terms of any future families that might move into the area.
3 minutes is up, Angus.
May require the roof space. Thank you very much, Chair.
Members? Archie?
Can you just clarify what you said there about condition 3A and B?
Yes, sorry. It was just that condition 3A, it was interesting hearing the discussion that took place on item 8 about the difference between, 1 story and 2 stories. I think certainly our clients are very happy that all the buildings round about appear to be single story, and we would also agree that the wall head height rather should only extend to 1 story. But it's just that to say definitively that there should never be any accommodation in the roof. We would maybe argue that subject to an appropriate design, it could well be that, you know, if there was a dormer window maybe to the west overlooking the A76 that wasn't to impact on any of the other buildings, that might be an appropriate design response here. Although, as I say, we wouldn't want to overdevelop the site, but it might just leave that avenue open if appropriate.
Any other member? Thanks, Angus. That's fine. Take your seat. Members are now in session. Ian?
Just looking at the indicative, that was one thing I did pick up from the inquiry, certainly. But just in regards to, I mean, I'm okay with what's been recommended by the case officer in this case, in regards to an approval. But in regards to, just a wee bit of advice in regards to 3A, as outlined there, I mean, does that restrict, there is permittable development rights anyway, so even if we were to grant it up to, I think, a metre out width, it's like a metre bubble, I think, isn't it? And that probably just would take that into consideration. So is that appropriate, having that 3A in there? Because I think in real terms it could just about be built in with the permittable development rights that are already there.
David?
Maybe Claire can go back some slides just to give you the general view of the street along there. Yeah, that one actually is very good. I think the reason for putting that on is if you look at the context there, particularly the traditional ones, the roof pitch is such that it's not actually capable of having dormers in them. That is quite a traditional low-lying cottage along there. I think what was in our mind as well is if you see the rise of the land there, it's going to be a bit more elevated. So if you had a 1.5-storey property, which is a single story but with a dormer on the roof, that could be quite dominant there. So it was really to do with looking at the types of property which are nearby, trying to remove issues of overlooking, and also looking at the height of the land there. That's really why we felt in this particular circumstance it was appropriate to put on 3A. If members aren't minded to go with that, then certainly I would say you should contain 3A, but then remove the last bit only, which is saying, and shall not include any accommodation within the roof space. We probably wouldn't have a great issue with one which was of, say, a 40 to 45 degree pitch with Velux roof lights in. So, you know, that's the bit I would be more happy to concede on, but certainly I think it should be single story in that location.
Ivor?
Yeah, I would like to return back to the earlier one as well. The fact that we have a private access way that is restricted in width with no footways. Earlier on today, we did actually take the decision that that wasn't acceptable. We now have a roads officer saying, well, it doesn't really matter. Can you clarify whether in condition 9 there will be a requirement for a footpath and passing places if necessary on that stretch of road? Because I would say this falls exactly into the same situation as we had for the application at Fairway Drive, where it is a private access, and I think we should be looking to look at road safety. And I note that there is no comment made with regard to the fact that children use this road, although it's in the objection, but it doesn't come up in the actual planning consideration. And it's the land use conflict between pedestrians and vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, condition 9 is the one that's actually been imposed by the Trunk Road Authority rather than our local road officer. So, you know, that's where that condition has come from. Our local roads officer has not recommended any further conditions other than the ones that we've noted in the report.
Ivor?
Yeah, that gives me concern that we have one officer in one part of the county saying you can do this, and another officer in another part of the, region rather than county, saying that it's not acceptable. That's not giving us consistent advice, and I think, you know, that could be challengeable.
David?
Just to be clear, this has come from the Scottish Government's Trunk Roads section, Transport Scotland. because it's coming straight off the A76, so it's not something that the council has any control over. Ken Druitt, that was along this morning, is the one officer that works through what's called the roads hub. So Ken actually is the filter for all the roads comments within Dumfries and Galloway now. So you will have consistency across Dumfries and Galloway because you've got the one person that's responsible for just seeing all that comes in. But what we have no control over is where you've got a trunk roads consultation comment. If the Scottish Government recommend conditions be attached, we have to attach them. If we don't attach them, we have to let them know that we're not attaching them, and they can have the right to call the application in. So that's why we've put it on in the way that we have. You might notice condition 8, for example, is not worded in our standard way for visibilities. That's because that's the way Scottish Government Transport Scotland worded.
Come back in, Ivor.
Chair, take it paragraph 2.1. Council's road officer, no objection subject to conditions. This application for planning principle envisages the erection of 2 dwelling houses. The access way is restricted in width with no footways. That was the reason that we were given for Fairway Drive or whatever it is. Why is it different on this occasion as it was for the previous one?
To be perfectly honest, I'm not even really sure what the locus of the local roads officer is in this one, because it's coming directly off the trunk road, which is the jurisdiction of Transport Scotland, onto a private road. And if that's the case, actually, we probably shouldn't have consulted local roads officers, really, because if it's not an adopted road, all they can do, as Ken said this morning, for a private road is provide advice, but it's not binding.
But the previous one was a private road. He gave advice on that, and he has given different advice on this.
Unfortunately, Mr. Druitt's not here at the moment, so can't defend that position. I'm not really in a position to answer it for him, I'm afraid.
Joe.
Well, if I can just address that, you know, I can see 2 passing places in that short bit of road that the road down at Newton Stewart didn't have. But I will, that's digressing. I've forgotten what I was going to ask you now. Ivory put me right off. It's the height of that field, and I think David mentioned the height of the houses and the effect on these cottages that's already there. Is there any suggestion that they reduce the land level before they start building, so reducing the effect that these houses, overlooking effect these houses will have on the existing cottages?
Claire?
Well, until we get the actual approval matters specified in conditions, then we don't actually know what the changes in levels or whatever. It might just depend on the design as to how they eventually do it, or develop the site where you can approve it. So, until we get that detail, we can't predetermine that.
If I can go back in, Chair, could we make a recommendation that the level of the houses is lowered to such that the overlooking aspect of the cottages on the other side of the road is reduced? Could we put a condition on that?
Yeah, David?
Well, that's basically why we added in those A and B to condition 3 to try and address that. I mean, it's envisaged that they almost certainly would be carrying out some levelling and excavation within the site, but as Claire says, we don't know exactly how much. But you can kind of preempt that by, you certainly, I don't think you could reasonably have on a condition requiring that you must excavate the site or whatever, but you could say that the houses that go on it shall not be more than single story and shall not have attic floor accommodation.
Ian?
Chairman, just to go back on the roads, I think Ivor's bringing up that point. I can understand why, but just the difference for me is that there was 200 metres of lead in the road, which was that where there was no places for passing other than really going into a piece of grassland. And I think 10 metres in off the actual access there, I think that's just short of 3 metres wide. That road, it's taken to 5.5 metres wide. There may well be a foot provision, might not. It doesn't ask for that particularly, but I mean, to me, there's quite a bit of betterment being proposed as part of the application, because you're getting a full 5.5 metres wide, and it's the first house actually gets access off the full-size road, and then you're actually it's creating overtaking or passing places for the rest of the units that are there.
Gail.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously this is a planning in principle at the moment, and the devil will be in the full detail when it comes forward through the process, as it should. We've got two fairly modern bungalows in the foreground there on the left-hand side, looking at the picture. Could you scan back to the properties right up the top of the road for me as well? The larger ones at the top, which do seem to me to be slightly larger than that row of cottages there, and certainly the two bungalows at the end of the road, would they have any limitations on being able to go up into a loft extension? Or is it going to be purely these two houses that are proposed? Within the current planning, would they be able to, if they wanted to apply for a loft extension without a problem?
David?
Well, all we can control is what's before us, and that's the actual application. If you've got an existing house, then there's no restriction in terms of permitted developments on those properties that are not listed in the conservation area. They could do that.
On that basis, Chair, I would be happy to move the recommendations, but to remove the second part of 3A, which would allow them, through full detail coming through the planning process, to consider loft extensions.
Tom?
I wouldn't be so sure that is a private road anyway, because it connects all the way through. I've walked through there, and you can drive through there all the way down through the Auldgirth Inn, and that's the old part of the Auldgirth village. That was probably actually the main road to Thornhill and Sanquhar from Dumfries at one point. I don't think that's I think that's been the main road at one point in its history. That's the only reason it's got tarmac on it.
To Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Perhaps on the back of what Councillor Hislop has said earlier, we should be looking seriously at conducting a root and branch review of the way that we do our business as a planning authority. Let me say, in a mid-Galloway context, you'll get no shortage of people coming forward to engage in the process, and I'm sure Jim McComb, as a colleague, could vouch for what I've just said. Be that as it may, I find it particularly disappointing that, you know, we put in the last part of paragraph 3A, that, you know, in the conditions that we do, and shall not include any accommodation within the roof space. I think that's unnecessary. I think it's unhelpful, and I think it's gatekeeping, Chair, at its very worst. And in my view, I'm totally supportive of the applicant's agent. That should be taken out. If we're serious about adopting a can-do attitude and assisting the meaningful and quality and sustainable development in this region, we've got to get away from this sort of thing.
Stephen?
My points have already been raised. Thank you, Chair.
Just a wee point of clarity on recommendation, or condition 8, sorry, and 9. It states in there that neither of the dwelling houses, I understand this is planning in principle, and we just have a site with an indicative plan. Should be no dwelling house by granted planning permission. As in 7, it says that no dwelling house. Because that would suggest that we're actually giving planning permission for 2, 8, and 9.
David?
That's actually a very valid point. I would accept that both condition 8 and 9, because the actual description is residential development, it's not specific. Yes, can I actually ask that members vary 8 and 9 if you're minded to go with approval, and just make that no dwelling house instead of the wording here.
Members? Got the recommendations? Anybody? Yeah.
As moved earlier, to take out that second part of 3A, please.
Members agree? No. It's otherwise minded? No.
The application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report, with the exception of the removal for 3A. No. 3A Part 2, and shall not include any accommodation within the roof space, and the variation to conditions 8 and 9 to state no dwelling house.
It also mentions in paragraph 2 dwelling houses. Should be amended as well, surely.
Sorry, that's condition 2, but that's actually correct because they could come back with just a single dwelling house on the site. So on that basis, having the bracket with the S is appropriate.
Members happy with that? We'll move on to 11. Item 11, 12 Castle Street, Dumfries, 14/B/3/0366 and 14/B/3/0409. We've got David Cartmel speaking on this. Run us through it, David. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for both planning permission and listed building consent to install 2 air conditioning units and erect a screen panel. The item is before the committee because of an objection from Lowburn Community Council. The site is to the rear of number 12 Castle Street, which is partly hidden by the application site name. Move to the next. Just to explain that you can see Burns Statue Square to the south and Greyfriars Church lies to the right of the application. A little clearer, the application site is hatched and the air conditioning units are to be erected on a flat roofed extension to the rear of the property. The ground floor plan of the chemist shop, which indicates the 3-story part of the building is to the front, and the L-shaped extension to the rear is single-story and it is flat roof. The 2 units will be erected on the left-hand side near the top of the diagram against the wall of the adjoining building. The flat roof plan to the right shows the 2 air conditioning units set to the rear of the roof itself. Also, in front of that, you can see another air conditioning unit, which is actually unauthorized and is currently being investigated. On the left-hand side, you can see the part side elevation. It's diagrammatic, so it's not overly clear, but the 2 PECT units are the air conditioning units above the railing. And in front of that is the screen, which is 1.2 meters high, a solid screen, obviously to hide them from public view. Hopefully the following photos will illustrate the location and surroundings better. That's the gable wall of 12 Castle Street, and to the right is Greyfriars Church. The flat roofed extension you can barely see in the centre between the 2, and you can see the unauthorized air conditioning unit wall. Closer view, again, the level of the flat roof is parallel with the top of the railing. You can see the dark wall of the adjoining building. Basically, the 2 units will be located against that wall between the 2 buildings. This is a closer view, shows the extension beyond the railings. You can see the L-shaped part of it, and the 2 units will actually be against the back wall. A bit closer, it shows the scale of the existing unit. The ones which are being erected are similar in colour and in size. The screen will actually be erected on the edge of the parapet. This is a view from the other side of the church, from the buildings at the back church present. You can just see the flat roof extension with a dark top underneath the window. That's the end of the presentation, Chairman. The recommendation is to grant without conditions.
Members, questions for David? Ian?
For past questions, Chair, I would move the recommendations.
Members in session? Anyone that's otherwise minded, go with the recommendation?
Thank you. The application has been granted, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Item 12 on the agenda, Odeon Cinema, Shakespeare Street, Dumfries, 14/B/3/0414. And David is going to speak to this one as well.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for planning permission to reclad the front entrance of the Odeon, which is a cinema and a bingo emporium. The application is before the committee. There's been an objection from Lowburn Community Council.
Can you move your mic a wee bit closer?
Sorry.
Can you?
Right, sorry. The application is before the committee, as there's been an objection from Lowburn Community Council. The application site, as you can see, is at the northern end of Shakespeare Street, and you can see the Cairndale Hotel to the top right, and the council headquarters immediately to the north of it. Diagram of the cinema. The entrance that we're dealing with is the extreme right, the kind of angled part of it, which leads onto the foyer, which of course links into the main part of the building. So the proposed works, which you're talking about, will be in the kind of angled part of the building on the extreme right. This plan shows the existing front elevation, which is currently profiled steel, partly overlain by advertisements. This illustrates the current condition of the frontage, and the reason for the application. It's basically looking quite stained, battered and bruised, and perhaps not fit for purpose. It's a slightly different angle showing the foyer linking to the main building. And a shot from the side rear showing how the facade is elevated to present a dominant feature to the street. This shows the proposed new cladding, which will have light brown boards, that's the smaller ones, enclosing off-white boards in the centre. The signage is the subject of a separate application for advertisement consent. This is a plan of the existing entrance walls, as you head into the entrance on either side. And the material at present is exactly the same, the metallic structure, the same as the facade. This is to be changed to reflect the material to be used in the facade. It's to have the left-hand side is to be white boards and the light brown boards on the right-hand side. There's a photo montage of the building as proposed. I'll have to say, Chairman, and recommend is to grant the application.
Members? Any questions for David? Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 4.6, the comments regarding the objections of Lowburn Community Council, it says that the applicants are not too keen, obviously, to go with the recommendation of the Community Council, and in brackets it refers in the final sentence to, while reusing the original facade, if it is still in existence, might be preferred option. The council has a duty to determine each application's merits. Do we have any evidence at all that the original facade is still there? Or is it possible to find that evidence?
I did raise that issue with the applicants, who said that they simply wanted to have the application determined as submitted. We could still argue that there might be a better solution, but what we have to look at is the quality of the application which has been made. So they've asked us to determine the application as it stands.
So at this point in time, it's not appropriate for us to find out if the original facade is still there or not. We just, okay.
Jane?
Please forgive me, Chairman, but I must have my eyes shut. I didn't actually see any of the surrounding towers and all the rest of it. Did I see the first on the pictures? You know, the whole idea. This is in a conservation area and it's surrounded by listed buildings. Now that's. But just next to it is another part of the old church, isn't it, St Andrews? And there are two bits of it. I think it might have been helpful had we been able to stand back from that and see, because actual fact, if you look at that, it's very recessive as it stands at the moment. It's hideous. There's no question about it. It's hideous. But I would say to members, you know, if they thought about and go on and look at the light brown, which is meant to be seen, you know, that's what this is about. This is a commercial decision to make this stand out from everything else without actually, I think, really being overly concerned. Can I ask about the colour? Have you any idea why that particular colour, or whether there was any officer input to the particular colour that was selected, please?
Sorry, no, there was no officer input at all. I checked the colour, British Standard colour, and felt that it was much more subdued than you see there. And I thought that that particular light brown was appropriate to that location. It didn't contrast with the tower, with the adjacent tower, which is part of the listed building.
Could we look at the brown again?
You want a site visit, we can have a recess for 10 minutes. David?
Chair, just looking at that, it's absolutely horrendous.
We're not in session yet with this question.
Right.
For David, members are now in session. On you go.
Thank you. You're just trying to get me wound up. That's absolutely horrendous. And actually, when you look at the existing one, it's no much better, but it's been there for goodness knows how many years, and whatever planning application it went through, if it went through one, that is totally detracting from the area. There's nothing, in my view, there's nothing to recommend it there at all. Sorry.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. It's not that many weeks ago we were arguing about the colour of windows in Glenluce Street because it affected, it's a fact. And look at this. It's an advertising hoard, and that's what we're doing here. And the thing that worries me as well, we're saying in a council policy, in conservation areas, if you have plastic windows, we've given an exemption, but when you want to replace them, you have to reinstate back to its original style, which is sash and case or case and sash windows. And here we are with an opportunity to take this back, or at least to convert it to something that's more in keeping with the area that it sits in. And I would say we should take the opportunity and review it based on the fact that it's no appropriate for the setting that it rests in. I just think it's a shame. And I think we should be looking to the company to come up with a design that's sympathetic to the area and its surroundings.
Jack?
Well, it's nothing like the ABC Miners that Tom, you and I used to go to. The facade of that is absolutely awful.
It was cream or yellow, was it not before?
It was that.
Ian?
What does it look like underneath? Any idea at all? Maybe that's what Jane was trying to get to. I'm just not sure. But what does it look like underneath that? What is it people are? What if it was to be refused today? What do people actually want? You'd want to at least think you've got to give the applicant some kind of direction.
Gail?
Chairman, that was a question. It was an absolute question. What does it look like originally? That's what I'm asking. So I'd like to get an understanding, please.
Well, those of you who've been long-term residents might remember it, but I mean, if you can go back through some of the slides, just to actually show the photos of what's there and that one's actually quite good, because all you can actually see there is the brick part. I mean, I'm guessing the plan shows the access into it. Was that added on? Because I can't see there's any evidence of anything Art Deco that would be behind that.
Tom, you've got a good memory.
Yeah. If you go back, when we granted planning permission to put that in, all it did was covered over the original frontage, which was sort of Art Deco stepped. It was 3-tiered steps. It was done in the very 1930s heavy Bakelite yellow plasticky stuff. So it was quite a garish outlook. I mean, I wouldn't say that, I disagree totally with Lower Burn Community Council, I wouldn't say the original aspect was a thing of great beauty, but I would certainly agree that what they're proposing is pretty bad.
Ivor.
Chair, I think we're at the stage where do we want this to stay as is, or do we want a new one? The new one would suggest, somebody said it was an advertisement hoarding. That would suggest a modern, up-to-date building. Might be done under the Trades Description Act once you get into the cinema. I think the new one is slightly better than what's there. It's tired and worn out, and it needs something done to it. So I would move that we approve the recommendation.
Gail, you're speaking this.
Thank you, Chair. I don't remember it in its original form. It was clearly way before my time. I have to say, this building's always been an ugly carbuncle in an area with fairly bonny buildings around it. But if we're working on that principle, we would never have built DG1. It's in complete contrast to every other building that's around it as well. And I have no issue with modern being sort of matched in with the old. And I have to agree with Ivor. I think this is an improvement. This is commercial business who probably, I mean, I don't know their financial situation, but I can't even begin to imagine what it would cost to take a building like that back to its original form if it's, if it's even salvageable. So I think that we would be better to have something that looks relatively attractive in context of quite a lot of unattractive shops and what have you around there anyway, and just accept that that would be better than what we've got at the moment. I'm sorry, we know the development around there. We do have some very beautiful buildings, but we have some very dodgy looking fronts in places. You just need to look at the slides.
Good. There.
Well, I did ask the question earlier on what it looked like underneath, and I'm grateful to Tom for being a longer standing resident of Dumfries than I am. Only came here in 1968. What it was like underneath. I think what we have here is a real mishmash of different buildings. You've got a tower that I don't know why it's still standing. I'm afraid that no. I feel like some things you can keep from the past, but I think some things have just got to go. And then you've got Barn Rows, and then you've got Giffhorn House, and then round the corner you've got DG1. Well, a very traditional, modern, traditional, ancient building, not. So I really feel that although what we have here at the moment is horrendous, and I tend to agree with Ivor that I think if that's what's in front of us, it looks a slight improvement on what we have, so I'll be happy to second the recommendation.
Gillian.
Yes, we have a motion to refuse from Councillor McKee, seconded by Councillor Dempster. Can I just clarify, perhaps, David?
I didn't second anything, Gillian, but what I would say is that I will put a proposal up, because if you look at page 107, Shakespeare Street forms the eastern boundary of the conservation area. Would you have that in a conservation area? That's the point I was making earlier. You can't even have plastic windows in a conservation area in any town in the region without you being made to remove them and put wooden ones in their place. And it says, to enhance the character, appearance or setting of the conservation area. And if members actually think that that's what that's doing, then I think they're disillusioning some of them, and I certainly wouldn't support that.
Right. Is that a proposal?
Yes, I would refuse on the basis that that proposal does not improve or enhance the setting in a conservation area. It's not in keeping with what we'd expect in the town of Dumfries. And I think I ever talked about the opportunity. This is your only opportunity for the next 20 years to get this right, or maybe even 30 years. Or how long is it if you were a boy at the pictures, Tom? Is it 50? So I would ask members to be very careful what you're doing, because all you're doing is demeaning the character of the town systematically. And a lot of us that saw DG1 going up didn't approve of that either.
Jane, just before we got to vote, have you got something to say there, Jane?
Well, I think that the Vice Chairman has actually articulated what I was trying to also say, so thank you.
Andy, you make it quick.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to ask Tom a minute ago, jam jazz it too to get the pictures in his day, but we'll not go. We'll not go there. Just a sort of technical question: where exactly is the end of the conservation area? Is it which side of Shakespeare Street? Right? Is it both sides? Because we're creating a dangerous precedent here. Because if you look up and down the length of Shakespeare Street, it means then the NCP car park shouldn't be there. It means that the Lorburn Centre shouldn't be there. It means that the flats shouldn't be there. It means that the table tennis club shouldn't be there.
Appraisal. The appraisal only came recently, Andy.
Sorry?
The conservation area appraisal, we've just got that updated recently.
Thank you. Just to, I apologise, Councillor Dempster, that was my mistake. We therefore have a motion by Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor McGregor, to approve the application as detailed in the report. And we have an amendment by Councillor McKee to refuse the application, seconded by Councillor Dempster, on the grounds that the design is not appropriate or in keeping in relation to design and materials, not appropriate and in keeping within the conservation area. Councillor Martin.
Amendment.
Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Motion.
Councillor Crothers.
Motion.
Councillor Dryborough.
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy.
Amendment.
Councillor Groom.
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCotry.
Amendment.
Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
Councillor Witt.
Motion.
With a vote of 7 to 10, the amendment has succeeded that and the application will be refused.
Item 13, Crichton Greenhouses, Crichton Park, Glencaple Road, Dumfries, 14/B/3/0285. And we have Lindsay Cameron speaking for this. Anytime you're ready, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. This is a planning application for the siting of a portacabin to be used as a welfare unit for a period of 3 years at the Crichton Greenhouses, Crichton Park, Glencaple Road, Dumfries. This first slide is a location plan showing the location of the application site in relation to the listed greenhouses, which are shown in blue in the centre of the photograph, and Glencaple Road, which runs along the western boundary of the Crichton grounds. The extent of the Crichton conservation area is shown hatched in red and extends just to the left-hand side of the slide. This photograph has been taken from the northern corner of the application site, looking in a southerly direction towards the site for the proposed welfare portacabin and parking area. The derelict greenhouses lie behind the terrace fencing, and the potting sheds and boiler house are contained within the sandstone building in the centre of the photograph. The raised beds, greenhouse and polytunnel, which are also proposed, would be located on the other side of the hedge to the right-hand side of the photograph. Panning round to the left, this photo shows the derelict greenhouses and the potting sheds, and the portacabin is to be sited adjacent to the potting shed, just the right-hand side of centre. Moving south along the hedgerow to the potting sheds, this photo shows again the location for the proposed portacabin and parking spaces. Panning round to the left and looking north, this slide shows Glencaple Road and the nature of the gardens in this locality. The area to the north of the mature tree is also where it's proposed to form the raised beds, which are to be formed under permitted development rights. Moving out of the Crichton grounds onto Glencaple Road, this photo was taken looking in a northerly direction. The proposed portacabin would be located adjacent to the potting sheds and greenhouse behind the existing hedge and the railings in the centre. This final photograph is taken from Glencaple Road, looking east directly towards the proposed location for the portacabin, which is again behind the hedge in the centre of the photo. This slide shows the proposed layout of the gardens, which include raised beds, a greenhouse and polytunnel, in addition to the proposed welfare portacabin. As previously advised, the raised beds, the greenhouse and polytunnel are classed as permitted development and therefore don't form part of this application. This is a more detailed view of the site plan, and it shows the precise location of the portacabin. This final slide shows the proposed elevations and floor plan for the portacabin. The proposals are considered to be in accordance with the relevant development plan policies, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Members, questions for Lindsay?
Could I just ask, the polytunnel, that doesn't come under planning? Quite surprised. I thought that a polytunnel.
The council, as local authority, benefits from quite extensive permitted development rights. It's only the siting of the portacabin in this instance that requires permission because it's the use of the land, and that's one of the exemptions in terms of permitted development.
Is that fine, Jane? Ivor?
Is there any proposals for the dilapidated Grade B listed greenhouses? Are they being repaired, or what are we doing as an authority to make sure that's rectified?
No works are proposed as part of this application to the greenhouses, but it has been indicated that if the gardening project is a success, that future proposals for the renovation or conversion of the greenhouses might be explored.
Gail?
I just wondered what exactly was a welfare unit?
It basically contains a disabled toilet, a seating area, and an area where they can sit when it's raining, for example. The user groups for the gardening project, the project's aimed predominantly at the over 55s as a social and health group.
Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I think I know the answer, but I'll pose the question to give me the chance to comment. The greenhouses, the derelict greenhouses, etc., who owns them?
Presume it, well, I don't know, but I presume it would be the council went through the Crichton Development Trust.
Well, that was the answer I was hoping for, Chair. You know, I think quite frankly it's a damning indictment that we as owners, you know, allow structures like this to fall into the state of dereliction and disrepair which they're currently in. And, you know, it's how can we be treated seriously or taken seriously when we're trying now to crack the whip over other, long overdue, some of us would argue, crack the whip over other property owners in Dumfries and Galloway and demanding that they deal with their dereliction when we allow property which belongs to us to get into such a state. No wonder we get laughed out of court, Chair.
Well, just to follow on, I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think we've allowed listed greenhouses to fall down, and we're going to replace it with a rather moderate polytunnel. And we think that's good. and we should be pleased to do that. I just don't think so. I find that we should be, I just think it's absolutely wrong. I think if there's a welfare need there for the over 55s to go gardening, well, let's get the old ones put up and let them use those. Then I would be happy. If they needed a polytunnel and raised beds thereafter, who's going to pay for all that? Presumably, the money's got to come from somewhere, and that could go into the refurbishing of the dilapidated greenhouses that we've allowed to fall down. Disgraceful.
Well, I think there are two separate issues. I won't, for a second, try and defend the position about the condition of the greenhouses. Obviously, as a planning authority, I cannot serve an enforcement notice ourselves. But the project here, which involves the polytunnels, I mean, certainly as long as I've known the greenhouses, they've been abandoned. There's never been any activity going on in there. They're not going to be pulling down the greenhouses. They can't do that. They're listed. But as part of this project, I understand that the polytunnels and with the raised beds I think there as well, that's part of that project, which presumably another part of the council is leading with. And this is just to facilitate that project. But as Lindsay says, if that project is successful, what that will hopefully do is start sorting out the greenhouses. But it needs to first establish whether or not there is that groundswell of desire to actually get it going.
Something, you say that because it's our enforcement officer, we can't ask our enforcement officer to enforce things upon the council. Well, who the heck can make the council do something that they're not? Because we need somebody that can go in and enforce something.
No, it's not, again, we're sort of not looking at this, but just to quickly answer that question, the planning authority cannot serve an enforcement notice on itself, but the council as landowner would have a responsibility for the upkeep and maintenance of its properties. So certainly as a committee, if you have concerns about the condition of the building, that's obviously open for yourself to minute those concerns and try and escalate it to the appropriate part of presumably property services that would be looking after, or through the Crichton.
Drifting away here again for the planning thing.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, we've got a perfectly good application here which should be processed. Quick question about the greenhouses. I mean, it's a Crichton Trust that operates on behalf of the council, then subcontract the Crichton Development Company. So they're not directly on our ownership. However, at the end of the day, if we put an enforcement notice on, they haven't got the money. If we paid to do it, then it would be costing us a fortune. The last I heard, they were trying to get grants, etc., to do them back up and bring them back up to a proper standard. Now, with all the changes we've had up in the Crichton in recent years, I don't know if that was ever processed.
Can we keep to the application?
Yeah.
No, about the greenhouse.
But just some of the wee things we said,
we keep to the application here.
Well, I'm moving we grant the application as it stands.
Jane.
There's quite a lot of chat in the report about how it's important that the portacabin should not prove visually intrusive, and it is of a standard design and finish, and I can't see anything in the conditions actually explaining what it should look like. You know, standard portacabins can come in all sorts of colours, and it is visually intrusive, that positioning just off the road. And I just wonder, Chairman, whether we should insist that it's painted a recessive colour. I mean, it's just not there, and it would be possible to put something up that just was not right. I would suggest historic Scotland sludge, splendid colour.
I think it's in the actual report, 1.4. Councillor Ian Carruthers and Alistair.
Thanks, Chairman. I put the question that we approve it as per the recommendations for a 3-year period.
I don't think we're into session yet, Ian. We seem to be digressing away from where we've actually we started off the planning questions to the planning officer, and we seem to have been digressing away from that. So, as I say, if nobody's got any more questions for the planning officer, I'll...
Thanks, I'm glad you clarified that. The only good thing about the dereliction of the greenhouses is it's hidden behind, to some extent, off the road. But my question was to the planning officer, do we anticipate extra volumes of traffic? And I presume the access will be either by the Brown Hall Gate, which I'm looking at the plan here, or perhaps the one further up. Would that be correct? Do we not? I don't suppose it'll be a problem, but I just want to check. I don't anticipate this being a problem.
Given the existing level of use of the Crichton grounds by vehicular and pedestrian traffic, it isn't anticipated that there be a material increase as a result of the project. The council roads officer didn't have any objections to the application, either in terms of road capacity or road safety.
Alistair.
Well, Chair, as the person that raised the red herring, please accept my unmitigated apologies. Having got the planning aspect of the matter out the way, though, and I would move, in fact, that the...
Well, I'll just say we'll go into session now, then, if that's the planning...
The recommendations, you know, as contained in the case officer's report, be adopted. I would crave your indulgence after we've got that out the way, if we can come back briefly to submitting a reference from this committee to the appropriate arm of the council about various buildings. Thank you.
I think we've actually got
Second that.
Oh, we've got Archie.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm happy to go with the recommendations in the Chair, but I'll remind members of the work that I've done with the Armed Forces guys out at Carmsalla when we actually knocked down the jungle that was in there and found 3 massive greenhouses. I think when you get to groups like this actually being in those areas, they'll actually take the work on themselves. And I think if we can support them as a council actually doing that particular work, then they will do that. And I think, you know, absolutely no problem discussing it, as Alistair says, after the planning side of things has been completed.
We have a recommendation to approve, subject to the conditions detailed in the report. The application has been granted, subject to the conditions in the report. Thank you.
Alistair.
Please, Chair, can I make the plea that we've got to get a mechanism put in place to allow this sort of thing, you know, to be addressed. I've written to Louise Matheson no later than this week, expressing my concern about the state that the old town hall in Newton Stewart has been allowed to get into. It's no far off dereliction, Chair. Now, I'm sure that can be replicated in many of the communities in Dumfries and Galloway by members. Exactly so, through you, Chair. You know, and we've really got to get our act together. As I've said, sir, there's no point in cracking the whip over other people and demanding that they deal with their dereliction and for us to ignore our own. That just brings us into total disrepute. So I'm not asking to make policy in the hoof today, Chair, but can we give consideration as to how we can put in place a protocol or a mechanism, not necessarily via this committee, but to get that objective achieved. I'm grateful to you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Alistair. Move on to item 14, Church Hall, St Mary Street, Sanquhar, 14/B/3/0502. And Beth Halliday is going to speak for this one. So whenever you're ready, Beth.
Thank you, Chair. This proposal is for the installation of an access ramp to the rear elevation and for a replacement door at the Church Hall, St Mary Street in Sanquhar. A full assessment of the proposals are set out in the committee report, but now I'll take you through the presentation. This is the application site within Sanquhar, block plan hall. This is the elevation and the floor plan or block plan as existing, and as ramp accessible area to that west elevation. That's just a part. So going through the photographs, that is the principal elevation. That's me standing at the junction of St Mary Street and Simpson Road. looking at the principal elevation with a flat roof modern front. And then again standing on St Mary's Street, but showing the rear elevation of the building, looking south. And just homing in on the actual part itself of the accessible entrance, showing the west elevation. And just another angle, but just showing the extent of the stone wall that's there. And then actually standing within the area of proposed replacement door that's to be replaced. And then just to give an overview, standing at the top, or near the top of we're about halfway up actually, of the hill on St Mary's Street, just looking down, looking south towards the rear. The part for the accessible entrance is actually behind, it's hidden behind that. The recommendation is for approval without condition.
Member, points of clarification for the plan officer. Ian.
Point of clarification, but not from plan officer, so I'll just wait.
Tom.
Can you tell me the grounds under which it was called back in?
It's in the report, Tom.
Yeah, it's in the report in 1.1 back.
That's what my question's got to be about, Chair, but in regards to process.
I think, well, once we get into the session, I'll be happy to answer that.
No points for the plan officer. Members are now in session. Jim?
Firstly, the reason was quite simple. I don't think it fitted council policy, and I think to refuse it would have disadvantaged the community, and I think it's an opportunity. No, if it's misguided, because it does say that it fits, or at least officers, and I'm grateful to Beth for the decision she made, officers seem to accept the proposal. The wording, David and I have had a long exchange over the wording of this, and I believe that, and it's a personal view, of course, I believe that we start laying out planning terms when we call in applications in, we leave ourselves open to an accusation that we're predetermining a planning application, whereas a vague call in, and it's legitimate, it is worthy of further deliberation in a public place, because if it didn't fit with policy, there's still a decision whether no member should agree the recommendation from the officer. When we start putting planning terms in, we could be accused of predetermining an application. Members that are not in this planning committee can happily say in a public place, I support this application or I object to it. We are restricted by our presence on this committee from offering a view. So I tried to call this in, offering no view, so that before I arrived here, I couldn't be accused of predetermining an application. That may or may not be wrong, but that was the reason behind it. And as a throwaway line, see a colleague with his hand up. We were also told by David, and I hope David will confirm this, that in the past, a mechanism existed whereby if a member called a planning application in, the planning officer could then convey the proposed decision to the member, and that member could then disregard the call in and allow the officer to deal with it under delegated authority. That was what David said before, but apparently that has changed. So it's worthy of a debate just simply to clarify for members of this committee exactly where each member stands when they call in a planning application that's submitted. And it was in the public interest that I called it in, no personal.
Take Gillian first.
Perhaps it's maybe worth me clarifying just on this point. Under the scheme of delegation in relation to the planning committee, it does state, and I'll read it out for you, so just bear with me. If within 21 days of the publication of the weekly list of new applications, or before the expiry date of any statutory public notification period, whichever is later, an appointed officer received a request on material planning grounds from an elected member for any application within Dumfries and Galloway to be referred to committee for a decision, the appointed officer shall refer that application to committee. There is nothing in that allows, once it's been called in and going to committee, for it to be reversed. If, however, that was something that was the members were wanting, that would be something that would have to be brought up with the ad hoc subcommittee review of schemes that maybe in January or February. It's not something for this committee at the moment.
Anything to add to that, David?
Just to say, I wholeheartedly actually agree with everything that Councillor Dempster said. You, as members of the Planning Applications Committee, are in this invidious position. We recognise that, and that's why we've accepted wording that is perhaps anodyne, shall we say. It normally requires that you have to give planning grounds, but we accept that if you, as members of the committee, say, I think this should be called in because this is the most horrendous scheme I've ever seen, or something like that, you've immediately predetermined the application. You would therefore have to declare an interest and couldn't take part in the debate. So totally agree with that. I indeed did say with there was one fairly recently, I seem to remember Pat Hanna was the case officer, and it'd been Jill Dykes had called it in. And there was a view that, well, why has this come before us? Common sense surely prevailed, and there was a chance to uncall it in. And at committee I said, yes, I accept that's common sense. I have subsequently gone and looked into this, and what Gillian says is correct. It's the same as where there's a call-in from the Scottish Government for a planning application. They can't take a look at it and say, actually, we've changed our mind, you can have it back. Once they've called it in, it's like a one-way valve, that's it. They have to determine it. It's read as the same here. As Gillian said, if you have a view on that and wish it to be considered to uncall something in, then there is a mechanism for that to be considered. But the advice I'm given is that I'm afraid once you've called it in, it has to go to committee. It's been removed from delegation, and that's it.
Ian?
Thanks. I mean, I agree entirely with what Jim or Councillor Dempster said. I agree with sentiments. I just thought there was a process in which, if you're a member of the Planning Application Committee, if you called it in, you had to remove yourself from the actual decision making, but maybe I'm wrong there. So that was the point I was looking at, because Jim's still sitting there, obviously.
No, we've always made that clear that as a member of the Planning Applications Committee, if you have called it in and not in the phrases that you've used, predetermined it, it's perfectly okay for you to come in, provided you've used words like Councillor Dempster has, and you've said that this is a matter which bears further consideration in a public forum. Something like that, where you've not predetermined it, there's absolutely no issue. I remember Carol Henschel in the past has given exactly that advice.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I would make two comments to what Jim has said. Firstly, no, for the first time today, it would appear, in fact, there's lacking consistency throughout the region, because, you know, there's been instances in the past where I and where colleagues in the Wigtonshire area, for instance, have been told you must specify adequate and proper planning grounds when you're asking for a call-in. That's the first point I would make. The second point is that previously on this very issue, I sought governance advice from Alex Haswell, and Alex Haswell's attitude was quite straightforward and uncompromising. In his view, you know, I or any other member of this committee calling an application in on due and proper planning grounds cannot leave his or himself open to the charge of predetermination. It actually came about an exchange of views that Councillor Gilroy and I had some considerable length of time ago. And never been too proud, as I say, to listen to other people. I took the advice, which was the best advice that I could get at the time, and Alec Hazel was quite clear. We have that right, but it would do no harm standing what I've heard today, sir, in fact, for the situation to get clarified. And Gillian's quite right. Now's not the time, but I think we should get it clarified, and it would be helpful not only to the members of this committee, but to the remaining 47 members, sir, who are no members of it. We would be doing us all a service. Thank you.
Alistair Witts.
Well, Chairman, I'm a bit disappointed because I feel that the issue has been clouded, not by the last speaker, but by what we're hearing. I mean, I've no objections to Councillor Dempster's calling in form of words, but he would be the first to admit that it's fairly simple, and I don't mean that in any, it's simple and straightforward. But were we not quite recently scolded in terms of being told you cannot just have an anodyne form of words, you have to drill down deeper. And I do have an application, I've called in an application, and I'm a wee bit miffed that I've actually had to rack my brains long and hard to have a form of words. Oh yes, even I have to learn, not which will appear neutral, but on the other hand has drilled down into the planning regulations. So I'm still confused.
Chair, just to clarify exactly what I'm meaning by this. If you are giving a ground, say, I think this should go to committee because I like the applicant or something like that. You know, that clearly is not a planning ground. You've got to have it in terminology that you're saying that this application raises policy matters. I mean, I don't want to be too prescriptive and tell you exactly what to write, but it has to be related to the planning application. It has to relate to the fact why you're wanting it called in. All I'm suggesting is it's really important for you not to make any comments that would indicate that you have predetermined your opinion on this. And as long as you can indicate that you think it's dreadful and should go to committee, but if you do so, you've then got to declare an interest on it, is my understanding of the situation.
No, we're digressing for the application a wee bit, but I think this is quite important.
I was just going to say if Councillor Dempsey moved approval, I would be happy to second them.
Maybe I should move to leave the room, but I thought in circumstances like that, as a member of the committee, I should stay because, first of all, I had caught it and it was only reasonable or that you understood why, but I'm happy to take my leave if members wish me to do that before he determines the application.
No. Tom?
So what we're being advised is that this is actually an internal decision made by this council. It's not a statute that says this must happen. Therefore, it's something that we as elected members have done ourselves. There's a meeting ad hoc committee, end of January, beginning of February. We'll get the matter resolved then, make it clear as, or a lot clearer than it is, I think.
The application, go with recommendations.
Just to confirm, the application has been approved as detailed in the report.
Gillian.
Just to confirm that the application has been approved as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Just taking every chance to have a learning opportunity for David because I like him as a planning officer. It's a non-return valve, David, rather as a one-way valve.
He did say non-return valve when he was speaking to me this morning. Right. Item 15, East Carswell Farm, Dundrennan, Kirkcudbright 14/B/2/0391, and David's got to speak in this one.
Thank you, Chair. Very straightforward application, which is only before yourselves because of who the applicant is. Formation of a new access and road onto an existing classified or trunk road requires planning permission. So otherwise, it's a very straightforward proposal for a new road. Junctions are fine. Roads are happy with it. That's the existing field gate. And you'd see the road would be running straight up in line with a hedge in the centre there. Viewing to the north, that's towards the farm. You can see there's very good visibility. And viewing the other way down to the main road, the A711, equally good visibility. So I say it's only before yourselves because of who it is. Recommendation is to approve.
Any questions for the clarification for the planning officer? No. Members are in session. Agree recommendation.
Just to confirm, the application has been approved subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you very much.
Look, I'll tell you what, lucky that wind farming then wasn't here today. That was good. No, it brought it down.